The school bus exploded into flames just as Frank Miller's hammer struck the final nail of the day. Through the inferno, he could hear children screaming, among them twin girls whose mother owned every major hospital from coast to coast. Frank didn't know their mother was Dr. Victoria Ashworth, the billionaire CEO who could buy entire cities. He only knew two little girls needed help. What happened next would change three families forever. Stay with me until the end and comment your city below. I'd love to know how far this story has traveled. The September afternoon hung heavy with construction dust and diesel fumes along Highway 34, where Frank Miller worked alongside a crew patching potholes that had plagued the stretch for months. His calloused hands gripped the jackhammer with practiced ease, drowning out the world in mechanical thunder. At 42, Frank had learned to find peace in the monotony of hard labor. It paid the bills, kept food on the table for his daughter Emma, and demanded nothing more than an honest day's work. "Miller! Take 5!" his foreman Rodriguez shouted over the noise. Frank killed the jackhammer and pulled off his hard hat, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his work glove. The autumn sun beat down mercilessly, despite the season making the asphalt shimmer like water. He grabbed his thermos from the truck bed, the coffee inside long gone cold, but he drank it anyway. Cold coffee was still coffee, and he'd learned not to be picky about small comforts. "You hear about them budget cuts?" Rodriguez asked, lighting a cigarette. "City's thinking about laying off 20% of the construction crews by Christmas." Frank's jaw tightened. 20%? Maybe more. Last hired, first fired, you know how it goes. Rodriguez took a long drag. "Though you've been solid, Miller, real solid. Might be able to keep you on if—" The conversation shattered like glass as a sound ripped through the air, metal screaming against metal, followed by the sickening crunch of impact. Frank's thermos fell from his hand as he spun toward the source. A school bus, the bright yellow unmistakable, even from 200 yards away, careened off the highway. It clipped the guardrail, sending sparks flying before rolling down the embankment like a child's toy tossed by an angry giant. "Jesus Christ!" Rodriguez dropped his cigarette. The bus rolled twice, maybe 3 times. Frank lost count as his legs were already moving, carrying him toward the wreckage before his mind could process what he was doing. Behind him, Rodriguez was shouting for someone to call 911, but the words seemed to come from underwater, muffled and distant. The bus came to rest on its side in the ravine, and for a heartbeat there was silence. Then the screaming started, high-pitched, terrified voices of children that cut through Frank's chest like a blade. Black smoke began pouring from the engine compartment. Frank slid down the embankment, loose rocks and dirt cascading around him. His work boots struggled for purchase on the steep grade, but he didn't slow down. Couldn't slow down. Those voices, God, they sounded so young. As he got closer, he could see small faces pressed against the windows, hands pounding on glass that wouldn't break. "Stand back from the windows," Frank shouted, though he wasn't sure if they could hear him over their own panic. The emergency door at the back of the bus was his target. The metal was already hot to the touch, and Frank could see flames beginning to lick around the engine compartment. Time was running out faster than water through a broken dam. He grabbed the emergency handle and pulled. Nothing. The impact had warped the frame. "Damn it!" Frank looked around frantically. His eyes landed on a large rock and he grabbed it without thinking. "Everyone move away from the back door. Cover your faces." He brought the rock down on the emergency window with every ounce of strength his years of manual labor had given him. The safety glass spiderwebbed, but held. Again. Again. On the 4th strike, it finally gave way, pellets of glass raining down like hail. "One at a time," Frank commanded, reaching through the opening. "Oldest kids first help the younger ones." A boy, maybe 12, scrambled toward him. Frank pulled him through, practically throwing him toward safety. "Run up the hill. Get away from the bus." More children came, a blur of backpacks and tear-streaked faces. Frank's arms burned from the cuts the broken glass left, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The smoke was getting thicker, blacker. The heat was becoming unbearable. "How many more?" Frank asked a girl as he pulled her through. "I don't know. Maybe 5. The twins are stuck. Their seatbelt won't." Frank didn't wait for her to finish. He boosted himself through the window, ignoring how the remaining glass tore at his shirt and skin. Inside the bus was a nightmare of smoke and chaos. Backpacks and lunchboxes were scattered everywhere. The driver was slumped over the wheel, unconscious but breathing. Frank would have to come back for him. "Where are the twins?" Frank shouted. "Here! We're here!" Two small voices came from somewhere in the middle of the bus. Frank crawled over overturned seats, the metal floor burning his palms. The smoke was so thick he could barely see, but he followed the voices until he found them two identical girls, maybe 7 years old, trapped in their seat. The seatbelt mechanism had jammed in the crash. "It's okay. I'm going to get you out," Frank said, trying to keep his voice calm despite the fire he could now see spreading along the front of the bus. "I want Mommy," one of the girls sobbed. "We're scared," the other added. "I know, sweethearts, I know. What are your names?" "I'm Lily," the first one said through her tears. "And I'm Rose," the other added. "Okay, Lily and Rose, I need you to be brave for just a minute longer, okay? Can you do that for me?" Both girls nodded. Frank pulled out his pocket knife, the one Emma had given him for Father's Day 3 years ago, engraved with "World's Best Dad" in crooked letters. He'd never imagined he'd use it for something like this. The blade was sharp, but the seatbelt material was designed to be tough. He sawed at it, frantically aware that the temperature was climbing with every second. "Mr. the Fire!" Rose pointed toward the front of the bus where flames were now visible, consuming the driver's area. "Don't look at it. Look at me," Frank instructed. "Tell me about your favorite subject in school." "Art," Lily said. "Science," Rose answered at the same time. "Those are great subjects." The first belt gave way. One down, one to go. His hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from the smoke inhalation. His lungs felt like they were filled with broken glass. The second seatbelt seemed even tougher than the first, or maybe he was just getting weaker. The flames were creeping closer, consuming seat after seat like a hungry beast. Finally, the belt snapped. Frank didn't waste a second. He grabbed both girls, one under each arm, and started back toward the emergency exit. But the smoke was so thick now he couldn't see it. He was navigating by memory and instinct, crawling over debris while carrying 60 pounds of terrified children. "Close your eyes and hold your breath," he instructed the girls. The heat was overwhelming. Frank's exposed skin felt like it was being pressed against a stove. His work shirt was smoking, actually smoking. But then through the chaos, he saw it a rectangle of light. The emergency exit. He practically threw the girls through the opening into the waiting arms of his co-workers who had made it down the embankment. Rodriguez caught Lily while another worker grabbed Rose. "Get them up the hill." "Now!" Frank gasped before turning back. "Miller, no! The whole thing's about to go up!" But Frank was already climbing back in. The driver was still in there. He couldn't leave him. The front of the bus was now fully engulfed, but Frank dropped to his belly and crawled forward. The smoke was so thick it was like swimming through ink. His hand finally found fabric, the driver's uniform. The man was heavy, maybe 200 pounds dead weight. Frank grabbed him under the arms and pulled. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest. His lungs begged for clean air. The metal floor was now hot enough to burn through his jeans, but he pulled inch by torturous inch back toward the exit. He could hear sirens now, fire trucks, ambulances, police. Help was coming, but it would be too late if he didn't move faster. The windows on the left side of the bus started exploding from the heat, showering him with more glass. Finally, miraculously, he reached the emergency exit. Other hands reached in, firefighters in full gear taking the driver from him. Frank collapsed half in, half out of the bus, his body finally giving in to the smoke and exhaustion. Strong hands pulled him clear just as the fuel tank exploded. The blast threw everyone to the ground, a wave of heat and pressure that Frank felt even through his closed eyelids. When he opened them again, the bus was completely engulfed, a pillar of black smoke rising into the September sky. "Jesus, Mary and Joseph," Rodriguez whispered from beside him. "Miller, you crazy son of a bitch. You saved them all." Frank tried to respond, but all that came out was a racking cough that brought up black phlegm. An oxygen mask was pressed to his face by a paramedic whose lips were moving, but Frank couldn't hear the words over the ringing in his ears. "The kids," he managed to croak. "The twins, Lily and Rose, are they?" "They're fine," the paramedic assured him. "Everyone made it out because of you. 22 kids and one driver. You're a hero." Hero. The word sat strange in Frank's mind. Heroes wore capes in Emma's comic books. Heroes had superpowers and secret identities. Heroes didn't worry about making rent or whether the construction crew layoffs would leave them unemployed by Christmas. Heroes didn't have ex-wives who called them losers and fathers who drank themselves to death in trailer parks. Frank Miller wasn't a hero. He was just a dad who knew what it was like to love a child more than life itself, and he couldn't stand the thought of 22 other parents getting the worst phone call of their lives. The ambulance ride was a blur of medical jargon and concerned faces. Frank's arms were wrapped in gauze, treating the dozens of cuts from the broken glass. His lungs were assessed, his vitals monitored. He kept asking about the kids, especially the twins who'd been trapped. But the paramedics just kept assuring him everyone was being taken care of. At Riverside General Hospital, the emergency room was controlled chaos. Frank was wheeled into a treatment room where a young doctor began examining his burns second degree. On his palms and forearms, she explained painful, but they'd heal with proper treatment. The smoke inhalation was more concerning. They wanted to keep him for observation. "I need to call my daughter," Frank said between coughs. "She gets out of school in an hour. I'm supposed to pick her up." "We'll help you make arrangements," the doctor said. "Right now you need to rest and let us treat these burns." But Frank couldn't rest. His mind kept replaying those moments in the bus, the twins' terrified faces, the way they'd clutched each other even while trapped, how small their hands had looked as he'd carried them to safety. He thought about Emma, about how he'd feel if she'd been on that bus, and his chest tightened with an emotion that had nothing to do with smoke inhalation. "Mr. Miller," a nurse poked her head into the room. "There's someone here who'd like to see you if you're up for it." Frank expected maybe Rodriguez or one of the other construction crew. Instead, a woman walked in who looked like she'd stepped out of a different world entirely. She wore a charcoal business suit that probably cost more than Frank made in a month, her blonde hair pulled back in a perfect chignon. But it was her eyes that caught him, green like sea glass, and right now filled with tears. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice catching slightly, "I'm Dr. Victoria Ashworth. Lily and Rose are my daughters." Frank tried to sit up straighter, suddenly acutely aware of his torn, smoke-stained clothes and the construction dirt still under his fingernails. "Are they okay? The girls? They were so scared." "They're perfect," Victoria said, and now the tears were flowing freely down her carefully made-up face. "Because of you, they're perfect. The doctors are checking them for smoke inhalation, but they're going to be fine." "Good," Frank said simply. "That's good." Victoria stared at him like he was speaking a foreign language. "That's good, Mr. Miller. You ran into a burning bus. You saved my children's lives. You saved all those children. And all you have to say is, 'That's good.'" Frank shrugged, then winced as the movement pulled at his burns. They needed help. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Victoria said firmly. "They wouldn't have." The other construction workers they called 911 and waited. The bus driver who ran the red light and caused the accident fled the scene. The passing cars kept driving. You were the only one who ran toward the fire instead of away from it. "I have a daughter," Frank said, as if that explained everything. And for him it did. Victoria pulled out her phone, the latest model that Frank had seen Emma drooling over in store windows. "I need to call my assistant. We're going to transfer you to St. Mary's Private Hospital immediately. They have the best burn unit in the state, and—" "I'm fine here," Frank interrupted. Victoria blinked. "Mr. Miller, I don't think you understand. St. Mary's has specialized treatments that—" "I understand fine, Dr. Ashworth, but I've got decent insurance through the construction union. Covers what I need. Save the fancy room for someone who really needs it." Victoria's phone hung in midair, her expression one of complete bewilderment. "You're declining better medical care?" "I'm declining unnecessary medical care," Frank corrected. "These doctors are doing just fine. Burns will heal, lungs will clear. I've had worse." "You've had worse than running into a burning vehicle." A ghost of a smile crossed Frank's soot-stained face. "You ever drop a sledgehammer on your foot from scaffolding 2 stories up? Now that's a bad day." Victoria slowly lowered her phone, studying him like he was a puzzle she couldn't solve. "The twins want to see you. They keep asking about the man who saved them. They want to know if you're a superhero." Tell them superheroes don't get this winded climbing stairs, Frank said, then fell into another coughing fit. Victoria waited until it passed. Would you be willing to see them? Just for a moment, I think it would help them process what happened. Frank nodded. Sure, but maybe after I clean up a bit. Don't want to scare them looking like this. Mr. Miller, Victoria said softly, you look exactly like what you are, a hero who ran through hell to save children. There's nothing scary about that. 10 minutes later, after Frank had at least washed the worst of the soot from his face, two small figures appeared in his doorway. Lily and Rose stood hand in hand wearing identical hospital gowns that made them look even smaller than they had on the bus. Their faces were clean now, but Frank could see the red rings around their eyes from crying. Hi, Mr. Miller, they said in unison, a practiced harmony that made Frank think they did everything together. Hey there, brave girls. You can call me Frank. They approached slowly, their mother following behind. When they reached his bedside, Rose, or was it Lily, reached out tentatively and touched one of the bandages on his arm. Does it hurt? She asked. Not too bad. Frank lied. Mommy says you got hurt saving us, the other twin said. Just a few scratches. I'll be good as new in no time. The twins exchanged a look, one of those silent conversations that only siblings who shared a womb could have. Then they both stepped forward and wrapped their small arms around Frank in a careful hug. Thank you for being our hero, Lily whispered. Thank you for not leaving us, Rose added. Frank's throat tightened, and not from the smoke damage. He carefully put his bandaged arms around them, gentle as if they were made of spun glass. You're welcome, girls. You were very brave in there. You helped me by staying calm. We were scared, Lily admitted. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared, Frank told them. It means doing what needs to be done even when you are scared, and you both did that. The girls pulled back, looking at him with those bright eyes that matched their mother's. Will you come visit us? Rose asked. Frank glanced at Victoria, who was watching the interaction with an unreadable expression. I'm sure your mom keeps you pretty busy. Please, Lily added her voice to her sister's request. We could show you our art projects. And my science experiments, Rose chimed in. Girls, Victoria said gently, Mr. Miller needs to rest and recover. We should let him. It's okay, Frank said. I'd like to see those projects sometime. My daughter Emma loves science too. She's about 5 years older than you two. She could come too, Rose said excitedly. We could all be friends, Lily agreed. Victoria looked like she wanted to say something, but a nurse appeared in the doorway. I'm sorry, but Mr. Miller needs to complete some additional tests. Visiting hours will resume at 6. The twins reluctantly said goodbye, each giving Frank another gentle hug before their mother ushered them out. Victoria paused at the door, looking back. Mr. Miller, Frank, I know you said you don't need anything, but I need to do something. Those are my babies you saved. My whole world. Please. Frank was quiet for a moment, considering. There is one thing. Anything. The driver, is he okay? I couldn't tell how badly he was hurt. Victoria's expression softened. He has a concussion and some burns, but he'll recover, thanks to you. Good. That's good. Victoria shook her head slightly, that bewildered look returning. I'll figure you out, Frank Miller. One way or another, I'll find a way to repay you. No need, Dr. Ashworth, really. But she was already gone, her heels clicking down the hospital corridor with the determined stride of a woman who was used to getting her way. Frank lay back against the pillows, exhausted now that the adrenaline was finally wearing off. He needed to call Emma's school, arrange for Mrs. Chen next door to pick her up. He needed to call Rodriguez, find out if he still had a job to go back to. He needed to figure out how he was going to work with bandaged hands and healing burns. But first he closed his eyes and let himself feel the phantom weight of those two little girls in his arms, carrying them away from the flames. He thought about Emma safe in her classroom, learning about photosynthesis, or the Revolutionary War, or whatever 7th graders studied on Thursday afternoons. He thought about all those parents who would hug their children tonight instead of planning funerals. Hero. The word still didn't fit right, like a shirt that was too fancy for his life. But if that's what those little girls needed him to be, he could wear it for a while. The test took another 2 hours: chest x-rays, lung function tests, blood work to check for carbon monoxide poisoning. Through it all, Frank's mind kept drifting to practical matters. The bills that would come from this, even with insurance. The time off work he'd need to heal. The fact that Emma's school shoes were getting too small, and he'd planned to buy new ones with this week's paycheck. Mr. Miller... A different doctor appeared, this one older, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I'm Dr. Patterson. I've reviewed your test results." "How bad is it, Doc? Give it to me straight." "The good news is your lungs are clearer than we expected. The smoke inhalation is moderate, not severe. Your burns will heal without requiring grafts. You're looking at about 2 weeks of recovery, maybe 3, before you can return to heavy labor." 3 weeks without pay. Frank did the math in his head and didn't like the answer. What if I went back earlier light duty? "Mr. Miller, you need to give your body time to heal. Those burns on your palms, especially if you return to construction work too soon, you risk infection and permanent damage." "Understood," Frank said, though his mind was already trying to figure out how to make the numbers work. After Dr. Patterson left, Frank finally managed to reach Mrs. Chen, his neighbor, who often watched Emma when he had to work late. She immediately agreed to pick Emma up from school. "I saw on news," Mrs. Chen said in her accented English, "Hero construction worker saves children." "That was you, Mr. Frank." "It's not a big deal, Mrs. Chen." "Not big deal, you crazy man." "Very big deal. I make extra dumplings tonight, bring to Emma." By the time Frank was discharged that evening, armed with prescriptions for pain medication he probably wouldn't fill because they were too expensive, and strict instructions for wound care, the sun was setting. Rodriguez had left Frank's truck in the hospital parking lot, the keys hidden under the wheel well where they always left them on job sites. The drive home was harder than he'd expected. His bandaged hands made gripping the steering wheel painful, and every breath still felt like he was pulling air through wet cotton. But he managed pulling into the parking lot of his apartment complex just as the streetlights came on. Garden View Apartments was a generous name for the collection of 3-story buildings that hadn't seen a garden since the 1980s. But it was safe, the neighbors were decent, and the school district was good, which was all that mattered to Frank. He climbed the stairs to the second floor slowly, each step reminding him of muscles he'd strained during the rescue. Before he could get his key in the lock, the door flew open. "Dad?" Emma launched herself at him, then stopped short when she saw the bandages. His daughter, 12 years old and already showing signs of becoming a beautiful young woman, like her mother, looked at him with eyes that were filling with tears. "Oh, Dad," she whispered. "Mrs. Chen told me what you did." "Hey, kiddo, I'm okay. Just a few bumps and bruises." Emma carefully hugged him, gentle, as if he might break. "You saved all those kids. They needed help." Emma pulled back, looking at him with an expression that was far too mature for her age. "Mom always said you were nobody special, just another construction worker going nowhere." Frank's chest tightened. "Emma." "She was wrong," Emma said firmly. "You're the most special person in the world. Those kids are alive because of you." Frank pulled his daughter close again, ignoring the protest from his burns. "You know what makes me special, MU? Being your dad. That's the only special I need to be." They went inside their small 2-bedroom apartment where Mrs. Chen had indeed left a container of dumplings on the counter, along with a pot of soup. The living room was tidy but worn, the furniture all second-hand but clean. Emma's honor roll certificates covered one wall, her science fair ribbons hanging beside them. "I started my volcano project," Emma said, gesturing to the dining table where a papier-mâché mountain was taking shape. "Mr. Davidson says if I do well at regionals, I could qualify for state." "That's amazing, Em. You need any supplies?" Emma bit her lip, a habit she'd had since she was tiny. "The good paint is kind of expensive, and I need some chemicals for the lava reaction. But it's okay, I can work with what we have." Frank looked at his daughter at the volcano she was building with newspaper and flour paste because the proper materials cost too much at the acceptance in her young face of limitations that shouldn't be hers to bear. 3 weeks without pay. The number loomed in his mind like a storm cloud. "We'll get you the good supplies," he said. "Your education comes first, always." "But Dad, with you not working." Let me worry about that. You worry about making the best volcano that Science Fair has ever seen. They ate Mrs. Chen's dumplings while Emma told him about her day, about the algebra test she'd aced, and the boy in her English class who kept trying to pass her notes. Normal 12-year-old concerns that felt like blessings after the day he'd had. Frank's phone buzzed occasionally with texts from coworkers, and unknown numbers word was spreading about what he'd done, but he ignored them all. "Dad," Emma said as she was clearing the dishes, "were you scared when you went into the bus?" Frank considered lying, giving her the brave father story, but he'd always been honest with Emma. Terrified. Then why did you do it? Because being scared doesn't mean you don't do what's right. Those kids needed help. Their parents needed them to come home. Sometimes, Em, you just have to move forward even when your legs want to run the other way. Emma nodded slowly, processing this. "I'm proud of you, Dad." Those 4 words meant more to Frank than any hero label the news wanted to stick on him. Later that evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Frank sat at the kitchen table with a notebook trying to make the budget work. Rent was due in a week. Emma needed those school shoes. The electricity bill was already a month behind. 3 weeks without pay meant choices he didn't want to make. A knock at the door interrupted his calculations. Frank opened it to find a man in an expensive suit holding a leather folder. "Mr. Miller, I'm James Crawford, Dr. Ashworth's personal attorney." Frank's stomach dropped. "Is something wrong? Are the girls okay?" "Oh, no, nothing like that. Dr. Ashworth asked me to deliver this." He handed Frank the folder. "She wanted to ensure you received it personally." Frank opened the folder to find a check. The number on it made him blink, sure he was reading it wrong. I can't accept this." "Dr. Ashworth anticipated you might say that. She asked me to tell you that this isn't charity. It's a consulting fee." "Consulting fee for what?" "School bus safety protocols. She's establishing a foundation to improve emergency evacuation procedures for school transportation. Your experience today makes you uniquely qualified to advise on this matter." Frank stared at the check. It was enough to cover 3 months of expenses, pay off the credit card debt from Emma's last dental surgery, and still have money left for those science fair supplies. This is really just her way of... "Mr. Miller," Crawford interrupted gently. "Dr. Ashworth is a woman who builds hospitals and changes lives every day. But today you gave her something all her money couldn't buy: her daughter's future. Please, let her do this small thing." After Crawford left, Frank sat staring at the check for a long time. Pride warred with practicality. He'd never taken what he hadn't earned, never accepted charity. But this wasn't charity, not really. This was one parent understanding what another parent needed. He thought about Emma's volcano, about the good paints and proper chemicals she deserved to have. He thought about those twins Lily and Rose who would grow up to do amazing things because they'd gotten the chance to grow up at all. Finally, Frank folded the check and put it in his wallet. Tomorrow, he'd deposit it. Tomorrow, he'd buy Emma the supplies she needed. Tomorrow, he'd pay the electric bill and catch up on rent. Tonight, though, he just sat in his small kitchen in his worn apartment, feeling the burns throb under their bandages and thinking about the strange turns life could take. This morning, he'd been just another construction worker worried about layoffs. Tonight, the news was calling him a hero, and a billionaire was forcing money on him for saving children he would have saved for free. Frank Miller wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but as he heard Emma mumble in her sleep from the next room, safe, healthy dreaming, whatever dreams 12-year-olds dreamed, he knew that whatever came next, they'd face it together, just like always. The only difference was now maybe they wouldn't have to face it alone. The morning after depositing Dr. Ashworth's check, Frank stood in the shoe store watching Emma's face light up as she tried on a pair of sneakers that actually fit. Not the discount brand from the clearance rack, but real proper shoes with good arch support that wouldn't fall apart after 2 months. The simple joy in his daughter's eyes made every burn under his bandages worth it. "These are perfect." "Dad, are you sure we can afford them?" "We can afford them," Frank said firmly, though the words still felt foreign in his mouth. They'd never been able to simply afford things before. Every purchase had been a calculation, a sacrifice somewhere else. But now, thanks to that consultation fee, Emma could have what she needed without Frank lying awake at night wondering which bill to skip. As they were leaving the store, Frank's phone rang. The number wasn't one he recognized, but that had been happening a lot since the rescue. Local news outlets, reporters, people who'd somehow gotten his number and wanted to thank him or interview him or both. He usually let them go to voicemail, but something made him answer this one. Mr. Miller. This is Margaret Foster from Riverside Elementary. I'm the twins' teacher, Lily and Rose Ashworth. Are they okay? The question came automatically now whenever anyone mentioned the girls. Oh yes, they're fine. Actually, that's why I'm calling. They've been talking nonstop about you since they returned to school. They've drawn pictures of you, written stories about the rescue, and today they presented you for their personal hero project without even asking permission first. The teacher's voice held warm amusement. I was wondering if you might consider visiting our classroom. It would mean the world to them. Frank shifted the phone, glancing at Emma, who was admiring her new shoes in every store window they passed. I don't know, ma'am. I'm not much of a public speaker. You wouldn't have to speak if you didn't want to. Just being there would be enough. The children have so many questions about bravery and helping others. Your presence alone would be educational. When were you thinking? Friday afternoon, if you're available. Around 2 o'clock, I understand if your injuries make it difficult. No, I can manage Friday. Should I bring anything? Just yourself, Mr. Miller. That's more than enough. After ending the call, Frank found Emma looking at him curiously. Was that about the twins? Their teacher. They want me to visit their class. Emma's eyes widened. That's so cool. You're like a celebrity now, Dad. I'm not a celebrity, Em. I'm just a hero who saved 22 kids, Emma finished. Dad, you need to stop acting like what you did wasn't incredible. Most people would have waited for the fire department. You didn't. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, heading toward the small diner where Frank had promised Emma lunch. It was a luxury they rarely indulged in eating out when there was food at home, but the check from Dr. Ashworth had bought them breathing room, just a little space to live instead of merely survive. The diner was busy with the Saturday lunch crowd, but Frank noticed the looks, the whispered conversations behind hands. The local news had run the story for 3 days straight. Construction worker, hero saves school bus full of children. Some people had even started recognizing him on the street, which made Frank deeply uncomfortable. He'd spent his whole life being nobody special, and he didn't know how to handle being somebody. Hey, you're that guy! Their teenage waiter's eyes went wide. The one who saved all those kids, dude, that was incredible. Just did what anyone would do, Frank mumbled, suddenly very interested in the menu. No way, man. My little brother was on that bus. Tommy Garrett. Red hair talks too much. You saved his life. The kid's voice cracked with emotion. My mom wanted me to tell you, if I ever saw you, that our whole family is grateful. Tommy's all we got since Dad passed. Frank looked up, meeting the boy's eyes. Tommy's a brave kid. He helped the younger ones stay calm. Yeah. The waiter smiled, blinking back tears. That sounds like him. Always trying to be the big man. Listen, lunch is on me today. Manager already said if you ever came in, your money's no good here. That's not necessary. Please, Mr. Miller, let us do this. It's the least we can offer. Emma kicked Frank gently under the table, her expression clearly saying, just accept it. So he did, though it sat uneasily with him. He'd never been comfortable with charity, even when disguised as gratitude. They were halfway through their burgers when Victoria Ashworth walked in. She looked as out of place in the small diner as a diamond in a coal mine, her designer clothes and perfect posture drawing every eye in the place. But she scanned the room with purpose until her gaze landed on Frank. Her face brightened, and she walked over without hesitation. Mr. Miller, Miss Slessor. What a pleasant surprise. She noticed Emma, and her expression softened. You must be Emma. Your father told me you love science. Emma, usually confident and talkative, seemed struck speechless by this elegant woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Yes, ma'am. I do. Wonderful. I was quite the science enthusiast myself at your age. Still am really, though now I mostly read medical journals. Victoria turned back to Frank. How are your burns healing? Fine, better every day. May I? She gestured to the empty side of their booth. Frank nodded, though he wasn't sure what the billionaire CEO wanted with them in a rundown diner on a Saturday afternoon. Victoria slid in somehow, making the cracked vinyl seat look like a throne. I apologize for interrupting your lunch. I was actually on my way to your apartment. The girls have been asking about you constantly. Their teacher called. I'm going to visit their class on Friday. Oh, how wonderful, they'll be thrilled. Victoria paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. Mr. Miller Frank, I need to confess something. I had you investigated. Frank's hand stilled halfway to his water glass. Investigated? Nothing invasive. I promise, just a basic background check. I needed to know who saved my daughters. She met his eyes directly. I know about your ex-wife, the custody battle you went through, the financial struggles. I know you've raised Emma essentially alone since she was 7. Emma's face flushed. You had no right. Emma, Frank said quietly. It's okay. No, she's right, Victoria said. I apologize. It's a habit from my world investigating everyone. But what I learned, Frank, you've done extraordinary things long before you ran into that bus. Raising a child alone, maintaining joint custody despite your ex-wife's attempts to paint you as an unfit father, keeping Emma in advanced classes despite the costs. You're remarkable. I'm a father, Frank said simply. That's all. That's everything, Zipum, Victoria corrected. Do you know how many fathers walk away when things get difficult? How many choose their own comfort over their children's needs? You chose Emma every single day. That's why you ran into that bus, because you're someone who runs toward responsibility, not away from it. The waiter returned with dessert. They hadn't ordered pie with ice cream for both of them. On the house, he said with a grin. As Emma dug into her pie with enthusiasm, Victoria continued, I have a proposition for you. Dr. Ashworth. Victoria, please. Victoria, if this is about more money, it's not. Well, not exactly. She pulled out her phone, showing him a photo of a building under construction. This is the new Ashworth Foundation Children's Medical Center. We're building it specifically for pediatric emergency medicine and trauma. I want you to be our head of facilities and safety. Frank nearly choked on his water. I'm a construction worker. You're a construction worker who understands buildings, who thinks about safety, who runs toward danger when children are in need. I've had 3 different directors of facilities in the past 5 years. They all had impressive degrees and no practical sense. You have something more valuable: instinct and experience. I don't have a degree. I didn't even finish community college. I don't care about degrees. I care about results. The salary would be $90,000 a year to start, full benefits, flexible hours, so you can be there for Emma. Emma's fork clattered to her plate. $90,000. Frank felt like the floor had disappeared beneath him. That was more than double what he made in construction on a good year. It was security, stability, a chance to give Emma everything she deserved. I need to think about it, he managed. Of course. Take all the time you need. Victoria stood gracefully. I should let you finish your lunch. Emma, it was lovely to meet you. Perhaps you'd like to come over sometime. The twins would love to meet you, and we have a rather impressive laboratory in our home. Nothing dangerous, just enough to encourage their scientific interests. Emma's eyes went wide. A laboratory like a real one. Real enough for some fascinating experiments. We're currently working on growing crystals and building a small robot. Victoria smiled. Think about it, both of you. After she left, Frank and Emma sat in silence for a moment, the half-eaten pie melting between them. Dad, Emma said finally, you have to take that job. It's not that simple, Em. I don't know anything about running facilities for a medical center. You didn't know anything about rescuing kids from a burning bus either, but you figured it out. Emma reached across the table, her young hand covering his bandaged one. Dad, this is our chance for a real life, not just getting by. Frank looked at his daughter, saw his own eyes reflected in hers, but also her mother's determination, her grandmother's wisdom. When had she gotten so grown up? We'll see, he said, but they both knew he was already convinced. The next few days passed in a blur. Frank's burns healed slowly but steadily, the angry red fading to pink, the bandages getting smaller. Rodriguez called to tell him his job would be waiting whenever he was ready to come back, but Frank heard the unspoken truth. The layoffs were still coming, and even heroes weren't immune to budget cuts. Thursday night, Frank stood in his bedroom trying to figure out what to wear to a second-grade classroom. His wardrobe consisted of work clothes and slightly nicer work clothes. Emma finally took pity on him, selecting a clean, button-down shirt and his only pair of khakis. "You look fine, Dad. The kids won't care what you're wearing." "It's not the kids I'm worried about," Frank admitted. He'd learned that Riverside Elementary was a private school, the kind of place where tuition cost more than his annual salary. The other parents would be doctors and lawyers and CEOs like Victoria. What would they think of a construction worker playing Hero Friday arrived too quickly? Frank parked his battered pickup truck between a Mercedes and a Tesla, feeling like he'd driven into the wrong universe. The school itself was beautiful manicured lawns, modern buildings, the kind of place Emma deserved to attend, but never could. The receptionist greeted him warmly. "Mr. Miller, we're so honored to have you here. The children are beside themselves with excitement." She led him through hallways lined with student artwork and trophy cases past a library that looked bigger than Frank's entire apartment. The disparities between this and Emma's public school made his chest tight with a familiar mixture of inadequacy and determination. "Mr. Miller," two voices called out in perfect unison. Frank turned to find Lily and Rose running toward him, their teacher calling after them to walk, not run. But the girls didn't slow down, crashing into Frank's legs with enthusiasm that made his healing burns protest. "You came! You really came," Lily said. "We told everyone you would, but Bradley said you were probably too busy being a hero," Rose added. "Well, Bradley was wrong," Frank said carefully, kneeling to their level. "I promised I'd come see those art projects, didn't I?" The classroom was like something from an education magazine, bright, clean, filled with technology Emma's school could never afford. 20 small faces looked up at him with awe that made Frank want to run back to his truck. But then he saw the banner across the back wall, "Thank you, Mr. Miller," with handprints from every child and messages like, "You're our hero and brave like you." "Children, this is Mr. Miller," Mrs. Foster announced unnecessarily. They all knew exactly who he was. "He's kindly agreed to visit and answer some of your questions about the day he saved your classmates." A forest of small hands shot up. "Did the fire hurt?" a boy asked. "Were you scared, Bob?" from a girl with pigtails. "Do you have superpowers?" from Bradley the Doubter. Frank answered them all patiently, keeping his responses simple but honest. No, he didn't have superpowers. Yes, he was scared. Yes, the fire hurt, but not as much as knowing children were in danger would have hurt. "My daddy says you're a real American hero," one child said proudly. "He says you represent the best of what people can be." Frank felt his face heat. "Your daddy's very kind, but I'm just a regular person who saw people who needed help." "That's what makes you special," Mrs. Foster said gently. "Children, how many of us see problems every day, and how many of us do something about them?" The lesson that followed was about community helpers and everyday heroes. Frank found himself drawn in helping the children understand that heroism wasn't about being special or different, it was about choosing to help when you could. "Mr. Miller's daughter goes to Jefferson Middle School," Mrs. Foster told the class. "She's a science champion there." "Is she going to be a hero like you?" Rose asked. "She already is," Frank said without hesitation. "She's brave and kind and smart." Those are the most important kinds of heroism. After an hour during which Frank had somehow been convinced to read a story and help with an art project, Victoria appeared in the doorway. She wore a different suit than the other day, this one navy blue, but she still looked like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. "Mommy!" the twins cried, running to her. "Hello, my loves. Are you showing Mr. Miller proper hospitality?" "He helped us with our clay sculptures," Lily said. "And he read us the dragon story with different voices," Rose added. Victoria's eyes met Frank's over her daughter's head, something soft and amused in her expression. "Different voices, Mr. Miller. You're full of surprises." "Dad reads to me every night," Emma had told Frank once, "even now that I'm too old for it. It's our thing." He'd kept doing it because it mattered to her, because maintaining traditions meant maintaining connections. "Mr. Miller," Victoria said, "I wonder if I could steal you for a moment. Mrs. Foster, would you mind if the girls stayed a bit longer?" "Not at all. We're about to start our science experiment." Frank followed Victoria into the hallway, noting how other parents and teachers nodded respectfully to her as she passed. This was her world power influence, the ability to write checks that changed lives. "Thank you for coming," she said once they were alone. "The girls have been counting down the hours. They're great kids. You've done a good job with them." A shadow crossed Victoria's face. "I've done my best. It's not easy being a single parent." Frank studied her, surprised. "You're not married?" "Divorced. 3 years now. My ex-husband decided being a father was too much responsibility. He lives in London now, sees the girls twice a year if we're lucky." She laughed bitterly. "All the money in the world can't buy them a father who shows up." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. We're better off without him. But watching you with them just now, seeing how natural you are, Frank, have you thought about my offer?" "I've thought about nothing else," Frank admitted. And before he could answer, his phone buzzed. Emma's school. Frank's blood ran cold. They only called during the day if something was wrong. "I'm sorry I need to take this." "Mr. Miller, this is Principal Davidson at Jefferson Middle. There's been an incident with Emma." Frank's world tilted. "Is she hurt?" "No, she's not injured, but she's been in an altercation with another student. We need you to come in immediately." "I'll be right there." Victoria touched his arm as he hung up. "What's wrong?" "Emma's in trouble at school. I have to go." "I'll drive you." "That's not necessary." "Frank, you're shaking. Let me drive." Her tone brooked no argument. The ride to Jefferson Middle School in Victoria's Bentley was surreal. Frank's hands clenched and unclenched as his mind raced through possibilities. Emma never got in trouble. She was the good kid, the honor roll student, the one teachers praised. "She's okay," Victoria said softly. "The principal said she wasn't hurt." "Emma doesn't fight. She's never been in a fight in her life." "There's always a reason. Children don't just suddenly change behavior without cause." The principal's office at Jefferson was a stark contrast to Riverside Elementary, cramped, outdated, with water stains on the ceiling tiles. Emma sat in a plastic chair, her new shoes muddy, her face streaked with tears. Her left eye was swelling shut. "Emma." Frank dropped to his knees beside her, gently examining her face. "What happened?" "She hit me first," Emma said through her tears. "But I finished it." Principal Davidson, a tired-looking man in his 60s, sighed. Mr. Miller." Emma broke another student's nose. "After that student gave her a black eye," Victoria said sharply, and Frank had almost forgotten she was there. Davidson seemed to notice her for the first time, taking in her expensive clothes and commanding presence. "And you are Dr. Victoria Ashworth, a concerned friend of the family." The principal's eyes widened. Everyone knew the Ashworth name. "Dr. Ashworth, I understand emotions are high, but we have a zero-tolerance policy on fighting." "What about a zero-tolerance policy on bullying?" Victoria asked coolly. "Because that black eye didn't come from nowhere." "Madison says Emma attacked her unprovoked." "Madison's a liar," Emma burst out. "She's been calling Dad names all week, saying he only saved those kids for money, that he's just a stupid construction worker trying to get famous." Frank's heart cracked. "And why didn't you tell me?" "Because it would hurt you," Emma said simply. "And you're already hurt enough." Victoria pulled out her phone. "Principal Davidson, I assume you're aware that bullying and harassment are also violations of your school policy, and that failing to address them opens the school to liability." Davidson paled. "Dr. Ashworth, there's no need for threats." "I'm not threatening, I'm clarifying. Emma defended her father's honor after enduring a week of harassment. If you suspend her without investigating the bullying, I'll personally ensure every parent in this district knows that Jefferson Middle School punishes victims while protecting aggressors." The room went silent except for Emma's sniffles. Frank pulled his daughter close, feeling her trembling against him. "Perhaps," Davidson said slowly, "we should investigate more thoroughly before deciding on consequences." "Emma, can you tell me exactly what's been happening?" Emma's story came out in fits and starts. Madison Hayes, whose father was a local businessman, had been furious that Emma's nobody father was getting so much attention. She'd spread rumors that Frank had started the fire himself for fame, that he was trying to seduce rich women like Dr. Ashworth for money, that Emma was trash just like her dad. Today she said Dad only saved those kids because he knew their mom was rich, Emma whispered. She said he probably looked up who was on the bus first. I couldn't let her say that, not when Dad almost died saving everyone. Frank's throat was so tight he couldn't speak. His 12-year-old daughter had taken a punch to defend his honor. He didn't know whether to be proud or heartbroken. Madison will be suspended, Davidson said finally. Emma, you'll have 1 day of in-school suspension for fighting, but given the circumstances, nothing will go on your permanent record. That seems fair, Victoria said, though her tone suggested she thought Emma shouldn't be punished at all. As they left the office, Emma walking between Frank and Victoria, other students stared through classroom door windows. Word had already spread Emma Miller had broken Madison Hayes' nose. In the parking lot, Victoria knelt beside Emma Designer's suit be damned. You're very brave defending your father like that. It wasn't brave, Emma said. I was really scared. Madison's bigger than me. That's what makes it brave, Victoria said gently. Being scared and doing it anyway. Your father taught me that. She stood meeting Frank's eyes. Take her home. Put ice on that eye. And Frank, the job offer stands. Actually, it's increased. Anyone who raises a child with that much courage and loyalty is exactly who I want protecting my facilities and the children in them. After Victoria drove away in her Bentley, Frank and Emma sat in his truck for a long moment. I'm sorry, Dad. I know fighting is wrong. Come here, baby girl. Emma leaned across the center console and Frank held her like he had when she was small and the world was scary. I'm not mad. I'm proud of you for standing up for what's right. But Em, you can't fight everyone who says something cruel. There will always be Madison Hayes in the world. It just made me so angry. You're the best person I know, and she was making you sound like some kind of con artist. People are going to say things, Em, about the rescue, about the money from Dr. Ashworth, about everything. We can't control that. All we can control is who we are and how we act. Are you going to take the job? Frank looked at his daughter's swelling eye. Thought about Madison Hayes and her businessman father, about the divide between schools like Jefferson and schools like Riverside, about all the ways the world was stacked against kids like Emma. Yeah, he said finally. I think I am. Emma smiled despite her black eye. Good. Maybe then people like Madison will think twice before calling us nobody. And we were never nobody. We were always us, and that's enough. But even as he said it, Frank knew the world didn't work that way. Being enough in your own heart didn't pay for college, or buy houses in better school districts, or protect your child from the Madison Hayes of the world. Sometimes being enough meant accepting help, accepting change, accepting that running into a burning bus could transform not just 22 lives, but your own. That night, after ice and ibuprofen and Emma falling asleep on the couch, watching movies, Frank sat at his kitchen table and called Victoria. I'll take the job, he said without preamble. Wonderful, she replied, and he could hear the smile in her voice. When can you start? Give me 2 weeks to finish healing and wrap things up with Rodriguez. Perfect. Frank, what changed your mind? He looked at Emma curled up on their second-hand couch, her face peaceful despite the bruising around her eye. My daughter got in a fight today defending me. I want her to never feel like she has to do that again. She'll always defend you, Victoria said softly. Not because you're nobody, but because you're everything to her. The job won't change that. Maybe not, but it might change whether she has to throw punches to do it. Victoria laughed a surprisingly warm sound. Fair enough. I'll have HR send over the paperwork Monday, and Frank tell Emma the twins want to meet her. They're very impressed that she broke someone's nose defending your honor. Rose specifically said it was totally awesome. Great, your daughters are going to turn mine into a prize fighter. Or mine will turn yours into scientists. Either way, I think they'll be good for each other. After hanging up, Frank stood at Emma's bedroom door watching her sleep. In 2 weeks, everything would change. New job, new income, new world. But the core of it, him and Emma against the world that would stay the same. It had to. It was the only thing that truly mattered. The bruises would fade, the burns would heal, the headlines would be forgotten. But the choice to run toward the fire instead of away from it that would echo through their lives in ways Frank was only beginning to understand. Sometimes heroism wasn't about the moment of action, but about what you did with the life that came after. The first day at the Ashworth Foundation Children's Medical Center felt like stepping into another dimension. Frank arrived at 6 in the morning, an hour before he was supposed to start, and spent that time sitting in his truck staring at the gleaming glass building. Everything about it screamed money and importance, from the marble entrance to the commissioned art pieces in the lobby. His work boots, still carrying traces of construction site mud, despite his best efforts to clean them, seemed to echo too loudly on the polished floors. "You must be Frank Miller." A woman approached him with a warm smile and an extended hand. She was in her 50s with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a practical bun. "I'm Dorothy Chen, the current facilities manager. I'll be training you for the next 2 weeks before my retirement." "Ma'am," Frank said, shaking her hand carefully, still aware of the healing skin on his palms. "I appreciate you showing me the ropes. I have to be honest, though, I've never worked in a place like this." Dorothy laughed. "Neither had I when I started 30 years ago. I was a military nurse before this. Dr. Ashworth, Victoria's mother, hired me because she said I understood systems and people. Same reason Victoria hired you, I imagine." She led him through a maze of corridors, each one pristine and somehow intimidating. The medical center has 15 floors, 3 basement levels, and connects to the main hospital through 2 skyways. We oversee maintenance, security, emergency protocols, and coordinate with medical staff for all facility needs. Frank's head spun with the information Dorothy provided HVAC systems that could isolate entire wings in case of airborne pathogens, backup generators that could run the entire building for a week. Security protocols that seemed more complex than anything he'd encountered on construction sites. But then they reached the 4th floor, and Dorothy pushed open a door to reveal a scene that made everything else fade away. It was a pediatric ward, but unlike any hospital ward Frank had ever seen. The walls were painted with murals of fantastical forests and friendly dragons. The ceiling had been transformed into a sky full of stars that actually twinkled thanks to fiber optic lights. Children in hospital gowns played in a central area that looked more like a kindergarten classroom than a medical facility. "This is why we do everything," Dorothy said softly. "Every system we maintain, every protocol we establish, it's for them." A little boy with a bald head, maybe 6 years old, looked up from his coloring book and waved at them. Frank waved back, his throat suddenly tight. "Jimmy's been here for 3 months, Dorothy explained. "Leukemia. His parents drive 2 hours each way every day to be with him. The Ronald McDonald House is full, so they sleep in their car half the time." "That's not right," Frank said quietly. "No, it's not. Victoria's working on building family housing on site, but these things take time and money even for someone with her resources." Dorothy moved on, but Frank found himself looking back at Jimmy, who had returned to his coloring with the focused intensity only children could manage. The tour continued for 3 hours. Frank met department heads, maintenance staff, security personnel. Everyone seemed to know who he was, the man who'd saved the bus children, including Victoria's twins. Some treated him with the awed respect he still found uncomfortable. Others, particularly the maintenance crew, seemed skeptical of this construction worker suddenly being their boss. "Don't let them intimidate you," Dorothy advised as they settled into what would be Frank's office, an actual office with windows and a desk and a computer he had no idea how to use properly. Half of them applied for this position and were turned down. "They'll test you, but once they see you're here to work, not to throw your weight around, they'll come around." Frank stared at the computer screen where dozens of emails were already waiting. "Dorothy, I have to be honest, I barely know how to use email. My daughter usually helps me with anything technological." Dorothy's expression softened. "Then we'll start there. Victoria wouldn't have hired you for your computer skills. She hired you for this." She tapped her temple, then her chest. "Your mind and your heart. Everything else can be learned." They spent the rest of the morning going through basic computer functions. Frank took notes in a small notebook the same way he'd learned construction techniques 20 years ago. Dorothy was patient, never condescending, and by lunch, Frank could navigate the email system and the basic scheduling software. "Mr. Miller." A knock on the door interrupted them. A young man in scrubs stood in the doorway looking anxious. "We have a situation in pediatric ICU. The main door sensor is malfunctioning and it's gone into lockdown. We have critical patients who need access." Frank stood immediately. "Show me." The pediatric ICU was on the 7th floor. When they arrived, a cluster of medical staff stood around the sealed doors, including a surgeon in scrubs who looked ready to punch something. "We have a patient coming up from emergency surgery in 5 minutes, the surgeon snapped. "If these doors aren't open..." "They'll be open," Frank said, already examining the sensor panel. It was similar to the security systems he'd installed on high-end construction projects, just more sophisticated. "Dorothy, I need a Phillips head screwdriver and a multimeter for maintenance. I can call them..." "No time." Frank pulled out his own pocket knife, the same one he'd used to cut the seatbelts in the bus. The screwdriver attachment wasn't ideal, but it would work. He popped open the panel, exposing the wiring inside. The magnetic sensors misaligned, probably got bumped during cleaning. It thinks the door is being forced. He worked quickly, realigning the sensor while manually overriding the system using the knowledge he'd gained from years of working with security systems on construction sites. The doors clicked and slid open just as the elevator dinged, announcing the arrival of the surgical patient. The surgeon stared at him. "How did you get..." "Construction sites use similar systems," Frank said, already putting the panel back together. "Just usually not for anything this important." Word of the quick fix spread through the building faster than Frank could return to his office. By the end of his first day, he'd fixed a temperamental elevator, identified a water leak behind a wall that maintenance had been searching for weeks to find, and established a new protocol for equipment checks that would prevent future sensor malfunctions. "Not bad for day one," Dorothy said as they prepared to leave. "Same time tomorrow." "I'll be here," Frank promised, though his head was spinning with everything he still needed to learn. When he got home that evening, Emma was waiting with Chinese takeout from their favorite place, another luxury they could now afford regularly thanks to his new salary. "How was it?" she asked eagerly. "Were you basically running the whole place?" "Hardly. I spent half the day learning how to send an email properly." Frank collapsed on the couch beside her. This job, it's huge. The responsibility. If I screw up, it could affect sick kids." Emma curled into his side, careful of his still tender burns. "Dad, you won't screw up. You're too careful for that. Plus, you care too much." Caring might not be enough. It was enough to run into a burning bus. It'll be enough for this, too. They ate their Chinese food while Emma told him about her day. Madison Hayes was still suspended, but her friends had been giving Emma dirty looks. However, other ones who'd never talked to her before had been coming up to share stories about their own parents, construction workers, and janitors and grocery store clerks who were their heroes too. "It's like what you did made them realize their parents are special too," Emma said. "Brady Jenkins said his mom works 3 jobs to keep them afloat, and he'd never really thought about how brave that was until he heard about you." Frank's phone rang, interrupting their conversation. Victoria's name appeared on the screen. "I heard you had quite the first day," she said without preamble. "Dr. Morrison is still singing your praises for fixing the PICU doors. It was just a sensor alignment." Frank, that just a sensor alignment could have cost a child's life if it had taken longer to fix. "You saved the day again." "That's a bit dramatic. Is it? You have a gift for being in the right place at the right time with the right skills. That's not common." There was a pause. "The twins would like to know if you and Emma are free for dinner tomorrow night. Nothing fancy, just pasta at our house. They're desperate to meet Emma properly." Frank looked at Emma, who was nodding enthusiastically despite only hearing half the conversation. "We'd like that." "Wonderful. 6 o'clock, I'll send you the address." After Victoria hung up, Emma was practically bouncing with excitement. "We're going to their house, their actual house." "Don't get too excited. It's just dinner." "Dad?" "Victoria Ashworth is like the richest person in the state. Her house is probably a mansion, and she has a laboratory." Frank wanted to temper her expectations, but he was curious himself. In the 2 weeks since the rescue, Victoria had been a constant but mysterious presence. She showed up at unexpected moments, always perfectly put together, always knowing exactly what to say. But he knew almost nothing about her beyond her profession and her divorce. The next evening, following the GPS directions Victoria had sent Frank, drove them through increasingly exclusive neighborhoods until they reached a gate that required a code. Beyond it, the road wound through trees before opening to reveal a house that made Frank's breath catch. It wasn't just big, it was architecturally stunning. all glass and stone and angles that somehow looked both modern and timeless. Emma's mouth fell open. "Dad," she whispered. "It's like something from a movie." Before Frank could respond, the front door burst open and Lily and Rose ran out, followed by Victoria calling for them to be careful on the steps. "You came!" the twins shouted in unison, crashing into Frank and Emma with equal enthusiasm. "Of course we came," Emma said, already charmed by the younger girls. "We promised, didn't we?" Victoria appeared in the doorway, and Frank felt his breath catch for an entirely different reason. She wasn't wearing one of her business suits, but simple jeans and a sweater, her hair down and loose around her shoulders. She looked younger, softer, more like a mom than a CEO. "Welcome," she said warmly. "Please come in. Dinner's almost ready." The inside of the house was even more impressive than the outside soaring ceilings art that Frank suspected cost more than his lifetime earnings, a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine. But there were also children's drawings stuck to the refrigerator shoes scattered by the door and a half-built Lego castle on the coffee table. It was a home, not just a house. "Emma, the girls are dying to show you the laboratory," Victoria said. "If that's okay with your father." Frank nodded, and the twins immediately grabbed Emma's hands, dragging her toward what they called the science room. Their excited chatter faded as they disappeared down a hallway. "Drink," Victoria offered, gesturing to a wine rack that probably held more value than Frank's truck. "Just water, thanks." She poured herself wine and him water, and they stood in the kitchen for a moment, the silence not quite comfortable. "This is awkward, isn't it?" Victoria said suddenly. "I'm not very good at this." "At what?" "Normal human interaction outside of boardrooms and hospitals." She took a sip of wine. "I can negotiate million-dollar contracts and perform surgery on infants, but casual dinner conversation. Terrifying." Frank laughed, surprising himself. "You're doing fine, though I have to ask, do you actually cook, or is there a chef hiding somewhere?" "I cook," she said, pretending to be offended. "Not well, but I cook. The girls insist on homemade meals when we're all home together. It's one of our things." She showed him the pot of sauce simmering on the stove. It smelled incredible, all garlic and tomatoes and fresh herbs. "My grandmother's recipe. She'd probably be horrified that I'm serving it to guests on a Tuesday, but it's the only thing I make that consistently turns out edible." "It smells amazing." They worked together to finish preparing dinner, Frank chopping vegetables for salad, while Victoria stirred the sauce and boiled pasta. It felt strangely domestic, like they'd done this 100 times before. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said suddenly. "Why construction? With your intelligence, your problem-solving abilities, you could have done anything." Frank considered his answer. "My dad was a drunk who couldn't hold a job. My mom cleaned houses to keep us fed. College wasn't really an option financially or practically, but I was good with my hands, and construction paid well enough to support Emma when she came along. It was honest work." Is, Frank corrected. "It is honest work. I'm not ashamed of it." "You shouldn't be. You built things, created something from nothing. That's more than most people can say." She paused. "My ex-husband managed hedge funds, made millions moving numbers from one column to another, creating nothing but wealth for people who already had too much." "Is that why you divorced?" Victoria's laugh was bitter. "Among other reasons. He thought my work was a hobby, something to keep me busy between charity galas. When I started, the foundation started pushing for real change in pediatric medicine," he said. "I was embarrassing him. The final straw was when I missed his company's anniversary party to perform emergency surgery on a 3-year-old. You saved a life." He said I ruined his reputation, filed for divorce the next week. He didn't even fight for custody of the girls, said they were better off with someone who had time for such things. The casual cruelty of it made Frank's chest tight. His ex-wife might have been difficult, but she'd never been indifferent to Emma. "His loss?" Frank said simply. Victoria smiled a real smile that transformed her face. "Yes, it was." The girls returned, then Emma's eyes bright with excitement. "Dad, they have actual microscopes and a 3D printer, and Rose showed me her robot. It can actually solve a Rubik's Cube." "It's not that impressive," Rose said modestly. "Are you kidding? It's incredible." Emma turned to Victoria. Did you design the program yourself? Rose did most of it, Victoria said proudly, with a little help from me on the debugging. They sat down to dinner, the formal dining room abandoned for the kitchen table, where Victoria explained they always ate as a family. The twins peppered Emma with questions about middle school while Emma asked them about their projects. Frank and Victoria watched their daughters interact occasionally, catching each other's eyes with shared amusement. Emma, your dad says you're working on a volcano for the science fair, Lily said. Yeah, though it's kind of basic compared to Rose's robot. Volcanoes aren't basic, Rose protested. The chemical reactions involved in creating realistic lava flow are actually super complex. Are you using the standard baking soda and vinegar or something more sophisticated? Emma's face lit up as she launched into an explanation of her plans for a more complex reaction using hydrogen peroxide and potassium iodide. Frank watched his daughter bloom under the attention, her confidence growing with each word. After dinner, while the girls worked on homework together, the twins insisting Emma help them with their math, Frank helped Victoria clean up. Thank you for this, he said quietly. Emma needs friends who understand her love of science. Most kids her age think she's weird for caring so much about school. The twins needed this too, Victoria replied. They go to school with children who have everything but appreciate nothing. Emma's enthusiasm, her genuine excitement about learning, it's refreshing. They moved to the living room where Frank could see the girls through the doorway, three heads bent over textbooks. Victoria poured herself another glass of wine and sat on the couch, gesturing for Frank to join her. Dorothy says you're a natural at the job, she said. Dorothy's being kind. I spent 20 minutes today trying to figure out how to print something. But you also diagnosed a ventilation issue that's been causing problems in the East Wing for months. Maintenance had 3 different contractors look at it. You found it in an hour. Frank shrugged. Airflow is airflow whether it's in a construction site or a hospital. The principles don't change. That's exactly why I hired you. You see things simply directly. Half our problems come from people overcomplicating solutions. They talked about the hospital, about the foundation's plans for expansion, about the family housing project Victoria wanted to build. Frank found himself offering suggestions, ideas from his construction experience that could make the projects more efficient and cost-effective. You know, Victoria said, her voice slightly loosened by the wine, when I first saw you in that hospital bed covered in soot and bandages, I expected some kind of glory-seeking hero, someone who'd milk their 15 minutes of fame for everything it was worth. And instead, you got a construction worker who can't use email. She laughed, a genuine warm sound. I got a father who runs toward danger to save children, who raises an incredible daughter alone, who takes a job he's overqualified for in spirit, if not in credentials, because he wants to give that daughter a better life. I'm not overqualified. Frank? She turned to face him fully. You are extraordinary. The sooner you accept that, the easier all of this will be. Before Frank could respond, his phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You think you're special now, Miller? Working for that rich bitch? Don't forget where you came from. Frank deleted it quickly, but Victoria had seen his face change. What is it? Nothing, just spam. She didn't look convinced, but before she could press, Emma appeared in the doorway. Dad, it's getting late. I still have that history report to finish. They gathered their things, the twins hugging both Frank and Emma goodbye, with promises to see them again soon. Victoria walked them to the door. Same time next week, she asked. The girls would love to make this a regular thing. Frank looked at Emma's hopeful face and nodded. We'd like that. Driving home through the quiet streets, Emma was uncharacteristically silent. Finally, she spoke. Dad, do you like her? Victoria? She's very nice. No, Dad. Do you like her? Frank gripped the steering wheel tighter. It's not. It's complicated. Because she's rich. Because of a lot of things. Emma was quiet for another moment. She looks at you the way you look at her when you think no one's watching. Emma, I'm just saying, Dad, you deserve to be happy too, and the twins are pretty cool. That night, after Emma had finished her report and gone to bed, Frank sat at his kitchen table staring at his phone. 3 more anonymous texts had come through, all variations on the same theme. He was a nobody trying to be somebody, using the rescue to climb a social ladder he had no business being on. He thought about Victoria's house, the easy way she'd welcomed them, and how natural it had felt to stand beside her in the kitchen. Then he looked around his own apartment, the water stain on the ceiling. He kept meaning to fix the secondhand furniture, the stack of bills that, while no longer urgent, still represented years of struggle. What was he doing? Victoria Ashworth existed in a different universe. She was brilliant, sophisticated, powerful. He was a construction worker learning to use email. The rescue had created a connection between them, but that didn't make them compatible. It didn't erase the gulf between their worlds. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was Victoria. The girls are already planning next week's dinner. Fair warning, they want to teach Emma how to build a simple robot. Thank you for tonight. It meant more than you know. Frank stared at the message for a long time before typing back. We had a great time. Emma's already talking about robot designs. 3 dots appeared, showing Victoria was typing. Then they disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally, Frank, I know this is complicated, different worlds and all that, but watching you with your daughter, seeing how the girls responded to both of you, some things transcend circumstances. Good night. Frank set the phone down, his mind churning. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Another emergency, another crisis for someone somewhere. 6 weeks ago, he would have barely noticed them. Now he thought about the children who might be involved, the parents whose worlds might be shattering, the heroes who might be running toward danger at this very moment. He'd saved 22 children from a burning bus, but somehow that felt simpler than navigating whatever was happening between him and Victoria. Fire was straightforward. You either ran toward it or away from it. This was something else entirely. Something that could burn just as bright but last much longer. The week that followed established a pattern. Frank grew more confident at the hospital, implementing new safety protocols and efficiency improvements that caught the attention of the board. Emma threw herself into her science fair project with renewed vigor, inspired by her interactions with the twins. And every few days, Victoria would find a reason to stop by Frank's office, a question about maintenance schedules, an update on the family housing project, a coffee that turned into an hour-long conversation about everything and nothing. People are starting to talk, Dorothy mentioned one afternoon, her tone carefully neutral. About you and Dr. Ashworth. Some of the staff think you're getting special treatment because of the rescue. Frank's jaw tightened. I'm doing my job. I know that. Anyone with eyes can see you've improved things more in 2 weeks than the previous manager did in a year. But hospitals are gossip mills, and a construction worker turned facilities manager catching the CEO's attention is prime material. We're friends. Our daughters get along. Dorothy gave him a look that said she wasn't buying it. Frank, I've worked for the Ashworth family for 30 years. I've never seen Victoria look at anyone the way she looks at you. That evening, Frank was preparing to leave when an alarm started blaring. Not a drill, he knew the schedule for those. This was real. He ran toward the source of the alarm, the kitchen on the 3rd floor. Smoke was already visible, and staff were evacuating patients from nearby rooms. Frank grabbed a fire extinguisher and pushed through the doors to find one of the industrial stoves engulfed in flames, the fire spreading to the ventilation system above. Without thinking, he aimed the extinguisher at the base of the flames, but he could see it wouldn't be enough. The ventilation system would carry the fire through the entire floor if it wasn't stopped. "Everyone out!" he shouted to the kitchen staff, still trying to salvage equipment. "Now!" He grabbed the emergency shutoff for the gas lines, cutting the fuel to the fire, then used his knife to pop open the ventilation access panel. The manual override for the dampers was inside. If he could close them, it would contain the fire to this room. The heat was intense, bringing back visceral memories of the bus. But Frank pushed through, reaching into the panel to pull the override. The dampers slammed shut just as the sprinkler system finally activated, dousing him in the flames in equal measure. By the time the fire department arrived, the crisis was over. Frank stood in the destroyed kitchen, soaking wet, his shirt singed, being checked over by the same paramedics who'd treated him 6 weeks ago. "Mr. Miller," one of them said with a grin, "you've got to stop making a habit of this." Victoria arrived as they were finishing up, her face pale with worry that transformed to relief when she saw him standing. "I'm fine," Frank said before she could ask. You ran into another fire. Technically, the fire was already there. I just put it out. She stared at him for a moment, then laughed a slightly hysterical sound. You just put it out, of course you did. The fire chief approached them. Mr. Miller's quick thinking prevented this from spreading. Those dampers being closed saved the entire floor, possibly more. After the chief left, Victoria turned to Frank. You could have waited for the fire department. The ventilation system would have carried it through the entire floor. There are kids up here, Victoria. Kids with compromised immune systems who couldn't handle smoke inhalation. She was looking at him with an expression Frank couldn't read. You always run toward the fire. When kids are involved? Yeah. What about when your own life is involved? What about Emma? What happens to her if something happens to you? The question hit harder than Frank expected. I try to be careful. Careful, Frank, you've run into 2 fires in 6 weeks. Both times worked out. Both times you could have died. Her voice cracked slightly. The girls ask about you every day. Emma and them have become inseparable, and She stopped, taking a breath. We can't lose you, none of us. The weight of her words hung between them. Frank wanted to reach out to offer comfort, but the gathering crowd of hospital staff made him hesitate. I'm not going anywhere, he said quietly. Victoria nodded, composing herself. Good, because I'd have to find another facilities manager, and honestly, you're irreplaceable. But her eyes said more than her words, and Frank heard what she wasn't saying. You're irreplaceable to us. The news about the kitchen fire spread through the hospital like wildfire, and by morning, Frank found himself once again labeled a hero in headlines he didn't want. Hospital's hero saves the day again ran across the local paper's front page, complete with a photo someone had snapped of him emerging from the smoke-filled kitchen. Emma had already cut it out and added it to what she called his hero wall, despite his protests. Dad, you need to stop being so modest, she said over breakfast, carefully taping the article next to the one from the bus rescue. You've literally saved lives twice in 2 months. I was just doing my job, Em. Your job is facilities management, not firefighting. She gave him a look that was pure teenage exasperation mixed with deep pride. Also, Victoria called while you were in the shower. She wants to know if we can come over earlier on Saturday. The twins have some surprise they're working on. Frank felt that familiar flutter in his chest at Victoria's name, a sensation he'd been trying desperately to ignore. Over the past month since he'd started at the hospital, their lives had become increasingly intertwined. Weekly dinners had turned into twice-weekly visits, with Emma often staying after school to work on projects with the twins while Frank finished his shift. Did she say what kind of surprise? Nope, but Rose texted me about 15 excited emojis, so it must be something big. At work that day, Frank noticed the looks from staff had shifted. Where once there had been skepticism about the construction worker turned facilities manager, now there was genuine respect. He'd proven himself not just through the dramatic moments, but through dozens of small improvements, fixing the chronic temperature problems in the NICU, redesigning the supply delivery system to reduce disruption to patients, creating an emergency evacuation protocol that the fire chief had called brilliantly simple. Frank Shea, Dorothy appeared in his office doorway, her usually calm demeanor slightly frazzled. We have a situation. He followed her to the main lobby where a crowd had gathered. At the center stood a woman Frank recognized with a sinking feeling, his ex-wife Melissa. She looked exactly as she had 3 years ago when she'd walked out declaring him a deadbeat who'd never amount to anything. Designer clothes, perfect makeup, and an expression of calculated determination. There you are, she said loudly when she spotted him, ensuring everyone could hear. The big hero himself. Too important now to return your ex-wife's calls. Frank felt every eye in the lobby on them. Melissa, this isn't the place. Oh, I think it's exactly the place. This fancy hospital where you somehow convince them to give you a job you're not qualified for. She looked around with theatrical disdain. Did you tell them you never finished community college, that you can barely use a computer? Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave, Dorothy said firmly. Melissa ignored her. I'm Emma's mother. I have every right to know what's going on in her life, especially now that her father is playing house with Victoria Ashworth. The mention of Victoria's name sent a murmur through the crowd. Frank's hands clenched at his sides, but he kept his voice level. You haven't seen Emma in 6 months. You missed her birthday, her science fair, her honor roll ceremony. Because I was building a new life in California with someone who actually has ambition unlike you. Melissa stepped closer, lowering her voice, but ensuring it still carried. But now I hear you're corrupting our daughter, letting her fight other kids, exposing her to dangerous situations. I think it's time we revisited our custody arrangement. You gave up custody, Frank said quietly. You signed the papers. Under duress, you made me look like a bad mother. I didn't have to make you look like anything. You chose David over Emma. You chose California over your daughter. Melissa's perfectly composed face cracked slightly. I chose a better life. And now that you've somehow stumbled into money, I think Emma deserves to benefit from that better life, too. The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. She wasn't here for Emma. She was here for the perception of money. The connection to Victoria Ashworth, the sudden elevation in Frank's status that she wanted to exploit. You should leave, Frank said quietly. Now. Or what? You'll be the hero again, save everyone from the big bad ex-wife. She laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. You're still the same Frank Miller who lived paycheck to paycheck, who couldn't provide the life I deserved. This hero thing is just temporary. Soon enough, everyone will see what you really are, nobody special. You're wrong, the voice came from behind Frank. Victoria stood there, immaculate in her white coat, radiating the kind of authority that made everyone in the lobby stand a little straighter. I'm sorry, who are you? Melissa asked, though her tone suggested she knew exactly who Victoria was. Dr. Victoria Ashworth, this is my hospital, and you're disrupting my staff and patients. Victoria's voice was ice-cold professional. Mr. Miller is a valued member of our team who has improved our safety protocols immeasurably. More importantly, he's a devoted father who has raised an exceptional young woman despite significant challenges, including an absentee mother who prioritized her own desires over her child's needs. Melissa's face flushed. You don't know anything about our situation. I know enough. I know Emma had to get her appendix removed last year, and you couldn't be bothered to fly back from California. I know she won first place at the regional science fair, and you didn't even call to congratulate her. I know Frank has been both mother and father to that girl while you've been playing house with your new boyfriend. How dare you? I also know, Victoria continued, her voice dropping to a dangerous level, that any attempt to disrupt Emma's life now when she's thriving would be met with the full resources of my legal team. I have 3 attorneys on retainer who specialize in family law, and they would be delighted to review the abandonment statutes in this state. Melissa took a step back, her bravado cracking. You can't threaten me. I'm not threatening. I'm informing. Emma is happy, healthy, and excelling in school. Any court in this state would look at the past 3 years and laugh you out of the room. Victoria moved to stand beside Frank, not touching, but close enough that the message was clear. Leave. Don't come back. And if you actually care about your daughter at all, call her on her birthday next time instead of showing up here to cause a scene. Melissa looked between them, her carefully constructed plan crumbling. This isn't over, she said, but the words lacked conviction. Yes, Victoria said simply, it is. After Melissa left, the lobby slowly returned to normal, though Frank could feel the weight of curious stares. Victoria touched his arm gently. Are you okay? I should be asking you that. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. She met his eyes directly. Nobody talks to you like that. Not in my hospital. Not anywhere I have a say. Before Frank could respond, his phone rang. Emma's school. Mr. Miller, this is Principal Davidson. There's a woman here claiming to be Emma's mother trying to check her out of school. Frank's blood ran cold. Don't let her leave with Emma. I'll be right there. Victoria grabbed her keys. I'm driving. The ride to Jefferson Middle School was tense. Frank's jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Victoria drove with controlled precision, taking turns faster than strictly legal, but never dangerously. She has no rights, Victoria said. The custody agreement is clear. She's still Emma's mother. She can make Emma's life miserable even without custody. Not if we don't let her. Frank looked at her, struck by the we in that sentence. Victoria. Frank. I meant what I said. You're not alone in this. None of you are. They arrived at the school to find Emma in the principal's office, tears streaming down her face. Melissa standing nearby with a security guard blocking her path to her daughter. "Dad?" Emma ran to Frank, burying her face in his chest. "She said she was taking me to California. She said you weren't fit to raise me anymore." "That's not happening, baby girl. You're not going anywhere." "Emma, sweetheart." Melissa started reaching toward her daughter. Emma flinched back. "Don't, you left. You chose David and California and your new life. You don't get to come back now just because Dad's successful." "I'm your mother." "No." Emma's voice was stronger now, her tears replaced by anger. "You're the woman who gave birth to me. Dad's my parent. He's the one who stayed up when I was sick, who learned Common Core math to help me with homework, who saved money for months to buy me a microscope for Christmas. You're just someone who shares my DNA." The words hit Melissa like physical blows. For a moment, her perfect mask slipped, revealing something that might have been genuine hurt. But then it was back, the calculated expression of a woman who'd learned to prioritize appearance over authenticity. "You've poisoned her against me," she said to Frank. "I've never said a word against you to her," Frank replied quietly. "I didn't have to. Your actions spoke for themselves." Principal Davidson cleared his throat. I'm sorry, what is your current last name?" "Hartley. Melissa Hartley." "Mrs. Hartley, our records show you have no custody rights and aren't on Emma's authorized pickup list. I'm going to have to ask you to leave school property." "This is ridiculous." "It's protocol," the principal said firmly. "Mr. Miller, you're free to take Emma home if you'd like." Frank looked down at Emma, who was still shaking. "What do you think Em want to take the rest of the day?" She shook her head. "I have my chemistry test. I studied too hard to miss it." Pride swelled in Frank's chest. His daughter facing down the mother who'd abandoned her and still choosing to stay for a test. That was strength. "Then we'll wait here until you're sure she's gone," Victoria said, speaking for the first time since they'd arrived. Melissa's eyes fixed on Victoria with laser focus. "So you're the rich woman playing mommy to my daughter." "I'm a friend of the family," Victoria said calmly, "and someone who recognizes Emma's exceptional qualities. Qualities she inherited from her father. Her father is a construction worker. Her father is a man who runs into burning buildings to save children, who works himself to the bone to provide for his daughter, who teaches her through example that integrity matters more than income." Victoria's voice remained level, but there was steel beneath it. "What have you taught her? That love is conditional, that family is disposable when something better comes along." Melissa had no response to that. She looked at Emma one more time, something flickering in her eyes, regret maybe, or just frustration at a plan gone wrong. Then she left, her heels clicking on the linoleum like a countdown to her exit from their lives. Emma took a shaky breath. "Is she going to come back?" "I don't know, baby," Frank said honestly. "But if she does, we'll handle it. Together. All of us," Victoria added softly, and Emma surprised everyone by turning and hugging her too. "Thank you," Emma whispered, "for standing up for my dad, for being here." Victoria's eyes met Frank's over Emma's head, bright with unshed tears. "Always," she said, and Frank heard the promise in it. After Emma returned to class, insisting she was fine, despite their concerns, Frank and Victoria sat in his truck in the school parking lot. "I'm sorry you got dragged into that," Frank said. "I'm not. Frank, I need you to understand something." She turned to face him fully. "I'm not just casually involved here. The girls adore Emma. Emma's become like another daughter to me. And you," she paused, seeming to gather courage, "you've become important to us. Very important." Frank's heart was pounding. "Victoria, I know it's complicated. I know our worlds are different. But watching you today, seeing how you handled Melissa with such dignity, how Emma trusts you completely, Frank, you're the best man I know. I'm just a construction worker who got lucky." "Stop." She reached out, taking his calloused hand in her manicured one. "Stop diminishing yourself. You're a father, a protector, someone who sees problems and fixes them without needing recognition or reward. Do you know how rare that is?" Frank looked at their joined hands, his rough and scarred, hers soft and perfect. The contrast should have emphasized their differences, but somehow it felt right. I don't know how to be part of your world, he admitted quietly, and I don't know how to be part of yours. But maybe we create our own world, one where our daughters can grow up as sisters, where integrity matters more than income, where running toward fires, literal or metaphorical, is valued. Is that what we're doing? Creating something. Victoria squeezed his hand. I'd like to try, if you're willing. Before Frank could answer, his phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Dad, I know you're still in the parking lot. Mrs. Chen saw you, just wanted to say I love you, and I'm glad Dr. A was there today. She fits with us. Frank showed Victoria the text, and she smiled. Tears finally spilling over. Smart kid. She gets it from her mother, so, Frank said, then quickly added, her birth mother, I mean. The intelligence part. The wisdom, the kindness, the strength, that's all her own. And maybe a little from her father. Frank thought about it. Maybe a little. They sat there for another moment, hands still linked, processing everything that had happened. Melissa's reappearance had shaken something loose, forced conversations they'd been avoiding. Saturday, Victoria said finally. The surprise the girls are planning, it's for Emma. They've been building her a microscope. Not a toy one, but a real laboratory-grade microscope. They wanted to give her something special for standing up to Madison Hayes. Victoria, that's too much. It's not. It's what sisters do for each other. Sisters. The word hung between them, heavy with implication. Is that what they are now, sisters? Victoria looked at him steadily. I hope so, if their parents can figure out how to make that work. That evening, Frank was helping Emma with her homework when she brought it up directly, as was her way. Dad, are you and Victoria dating? Frank nearly dropped his coffee. What makes you ask that? Well, she stood up to Mom for you. She held your hand in the truck. Yes, Mrs. Chen saw that too. She sees everything. And the way you look at each other, it's like the way people look at each other in movies before they kiss. M. I'm not a little kid anymore, Dad. I know you've been alone since Mom left, and I know you think you have to be alone for my sake. But you don't. Frank set down his coffee and really looked at his daughter. Somewhere in the chaos of the past months, she'd grown up. The baby who'd clung to him when Melissa walked out had become this wise, perceptive young woman. It's complicated, Em, because she's rich. Among other things. But you like her. It wasn't a question, but Frank answered anyway. Yeah, I do. And she likes you. The twins told me she talks about you all the time. Rose says she's never seen her mom as happy as she's been lately. But the twins need to mind their own business, Frank said, but he was smiling. They're kids. Our business is their business. Emma grinned. Besides, they're already planning our first family vacation. Apparently Victoria has a beach house. Of course she does. Dad, I'm serious. You deserve to be happy. And if Victoria makes you happy, then I'm all for it. Plus, having sisters would be pretty cool. Frank pulled Emma into a hug. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher, she said into his shoulder. That night, after Emma was asleep, Frank stood on his small balcony looking out at the city lights. His phone showed 3 messages from Victoria, checking in, making sure they were both okay after the day's drama. He thought about Melissa's words that he was nobody special, that this was all temporary, that soon enough everyone would see what he really was. But then he thought about Victoria's hand in his, about Emma's fierce defense of their small family, about the twins planning surprises for the girl they already considered a sister. Maybe Melissa was wrong. Maybe he wasn't nobody special. Maybe he was exactly who he needed to be for the people who mattered. He called Victoria back. Frank, is everything okay? Everything's fine. I just wanted to thank you for today, for everything. You don't need to thank me. I do. You stood up to my ex-wife. You defended me. You were there for Emma. That's not nothing. It's what you do for people you care about, Victoria said softly. Is that what we are? People who care about each other. There was a pause. Then Victoria's voice, warm and certain. I'd like us to be more than that. If you're ready. Frank thought about the fires he'd run toward, the children he'd saved, the fears he'd faced. This was just another kind of courage, wasn't it? The courage to let someone in to build something new, to believe he deserved the kind of happiness Emma insisted he did. "I'm ready," he said. "Good. Then Saturday after the girls give Emma her surprise, maybe we could have dinner. Just the two of us. Let the girls have a sleepover while we actually talk about what this is." "I'd like that." After they hung up, Frank remained on the balcony feeling something shift in his chest. For 3 years, he'd focused solely on Emma, on survival, on getting through each day. But now maybe it was time to focus on living instead of just surviving. Saturday came quickly. Frank and Emma arrived at Victoria's house to find the twins practically vibrating with excitement. They dragged Emma to the laboratory before she could even say hello properly. "Close your eyes," Lily commanded. Emma obeyed, letting them guide her. "Okay, open." There on the laboratory bench sat a professional microscope complete with multiple objectives, a digital camera attachment, and a set of prepared slides. Emma's gasp was everything the twins had hoped for. This is too much," Emma said, tears in her eyes. "It's not," Rose said firmly. "You're going to be a scientist. You need proper equipment." "We thought maybe we could do experiments together," Lily added hopefully. "Like real scientists do, collaborating and stuff." Emma hugged both girls tightly. "It's perfect. You're perfect. This is all perfect." Frank caught Victoria's eye, saw his own emotions reflected there, the joy of watching their daughters bond, the sense of something clicking into place. "So," Victoria said quietly while the girls excitedly set up the microscope, "dinner tonight. I'm looking forward to it." The girls were so absorbed in their scientific endeavors that they barely noticed when Frank and Victoria left for dinner. They'd gone to a small Italian restaurant. Nothing fancy, just good food and quiet atmosphere where they could actually talk. "I owe you an apology," Victoria said after they'd ordered. "I had you investigated when we first met. That was invasive and wrong. You were protecting your daughters. I would have done the same. Still, I should have just asked you directly about your past." "Would you have believed me?" Victoria considered this. "Probably not. I've learned not to trust easily. My ex-husband was very good at saying the right things." "What happened?" "If you don't mind me asking." Victoria took a sip of her wine. "Richard was everything I thought I was supposed to want. Harvard MBA, came from money, knew all the right people. My parents loved him. He said all the right things about supporting my career, wanting a family, building something together." Frank waited, sensing there was more. "But once we were married, once the twins were born, he changed. Or maybe he just stopped pretending. He wanted a trophy wife who happened to be a doctor, prestigious but not too demanding on his time or attention. When I started the foundation, started pushing for real changes in pediatric medicine, he saw it as a betrayal. I was supposed to make him look good, not overshadow him." "His loss?" Frank said, simply echoing his words from weeks ago. "I used to think there was something wrong with me, that I was too ambitious, too independent, too much." She met his eyes. "But watching you with Emma, seeing how you celebrate her intelligence, her strength, her independence, it made me realize Richard was the problem, not me." "You're amazing, Victoria. Your daughters are lucky to have you." "They need more than just me, though. They need to see what a good man looks like, what a real father figure is. Richard calls them twice a year, sends expensive gifts to make up for his absence. You've spent more time with them in 2 months than he has in 2 years. The weight of that responsibility settled on Frank's shoulders, but it wasn't unwelcome. They're easy to love. So is Emma. Frank, I need you to know I would never try to replace Melissa. Whatever she is or isn't, she's Emma's mother. But I care about that girl. I want to see her succeed, see her become the brilliant scientist she's meant to be. She could use a female role model who actually shows up, Frank admitted. Someone who proves you can be successful and a good parent. They talked through dinner about their daughters, their work, their dreams for the future. Victoria told him about her plans to expand the foundation to build more children's medical centers in underserved areas. Frank shared his ideas for improving hospital safety protocols, maybe even consulting for other medical facilities. You could, Victoria said, consult. Your experience, your instincts, other hospitals would pay good money for that. I'm still learning email, Frank reminded her. You're selling yourself short again. She reached across the table, taking his hand. Frank, I need to tell you something. These past 2 months since you came into our lives, it's the happiest I've been in years. The girls are thriving. I actually look forward to coming home instead of staying late at the office, and I've remembered what it feels like to have a partner, not just in parenting, but in life. Frank turned his hand palm up, interlacing their fingers. I never expected this. Any of it. The job you are girls becoming friends. 6 weeks ago, I was just trying to make rent and keep Emma in science club. Now I can't imagine our lives without you and the twins in it. Victoria's smile was radiant. Good, because we can't imagine our lives without you and Emma either. They drove back to Victoria's house in comfortable silence, hands linked over the center console. The girls were still in the laboratory now, using the microscope to examine everything from hair samples to drops of pond water Victoria kept for such experiments. Dad, Dr. A! Emma called out excitedly. Come see, we found paramecium! They spent the next hour looking at microscopic organisms, the girls' enthusiasm infectious. Frank found himself drawn into their excitement, asking questions, making observations. Victoria stood back, watching them with a soft expression. What? Frank asked, catching her look. Nothing. Just this. All of this. It's perfect. Later, after the girls had finally exhausted themselves and were settled in the living room for their sleepover, Frank and Victoria stood in the kitchen, reluctant to end the evening. I should go, Frank said without moving. You could stay, Victoria offered. The guest room is always made up. Victoria. I know. Too fast. I don't want this to end. Frank pulled her into a gentle hug, feeling her relax against him. It's not ending. We're just beginning. Promise. I promise. As Frank drove home alone, leaving Emma for her first sleepover with the twins, he thought about promises and families and second chances. 6 weeks ago, he'd run into a burning bus to save strangers' children. Now those strangers had become family or something close to it. Maybe that's how life worked sometimes. You ran toward the fire, and on the other side, you found something worth saving, worth building, worth believing in. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Dad, the twins want to know if we can make this a weekly thing. Sleepovers on Saturdays, family dinners on Sundays. Can we, please? Frank smiled, typing back. We'll talk about it tomorrow at family dinner. Family dinner. The words felt right, felt true. Felt like a promise of something good and solid and real. Maybe Melissa was wrong. Maybe he wasn't nobody special. Maybe he was exactly who he needed to be, a father, a protector, and maybe, just maybe, someone worthy of a second chance at love. The custody papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Melissa's scene at the hospital. Frank stood in his kitchen, coffee growing cold in his hand, reading through the legal documents that claimed he was an unfit parent who was exposing Emma to dangerous situations and allowing inappropriate relationships to influence her development. The last part was clearly aimed at Victoria, though Melissa's lawyer had been careful not to name her directly. Emma found him there 20 minutes later, still standing in the same spot. She took one look at his face and knew something was wrong. Dad, what is it? Frank tried to shield the papers, but Emma was too quick grabbing them before he could stop her. She read rapidly, her face growing paler with each word. She can't do this, Emma said, her voice shaking. She can't just come back and take me away. Can she? No, baby girl, she can't. Frank pulled Emma close, feeling her tremble against him. We'll fight this. I promise. With what money Dad lawyers cost, we'll figure it out. But even as he said it, Frank knew their savings, while better than before, wouldn't cover a prolonged custody battle. Melissa had married money in David Hartley, a real estate developer with deep pockets and connections. Emma pulled back, wiping her eyes with determination. I'm calling Victoria. Em, we can't. But Emma was already dialing, and Frank could hear Victoria's voice answer immediately, concern evident even through the phone speaker. Emma, is everything all right? You never call this early. Melissa filed for custody, Emma said without preamble. She's trying to take me away from Dad. There was a pause, then Victoria's voice steel hard. She's what? Let me speak to your father. Emma handed over the phone, and Frank took it reluctantly. Victoria, this isn't your problem. Frank Miller. If you finish that sentence, I will drive over there and shake some sense into you. Now tell me exactly what the papers say. Frank read her the key points, each allegation more ridiculous than the last. According to Melissa's filing, Frank's reckless heroics had made Emma believe violence was acceptable, leading to her fight with Madison Hayes. His relationship with Victoria was described as seeking financial gain through emotional manipulation of a vulnerable divorced mother. That manipulative... Victoria cut herself off. Sorry, I'm at the hospital. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't do anything until I arrive. Victoria, you have surgeries. I have partners who can cover. 20 minutes, Frank. She arrived in 15, still in her scrubs, having clearly broken several traffic laws. With her was a man in an expensive suit who looked like he ate opposing lawyers for breakfast. Frank, Emma, this is James Crawford. You met him once before, Frank. He's my personal attorney, but more importantly, he specializes in family law. Crawford shook Frank's hand firmly. Dr. Ashworth has filled me in on the basics during the drive. May I see the filing? Frank handed over the papers, watching Crawford's expression grow increasingly dismissive as he read. This is what we call a nuisance suit, Crawford said finally. She has no grounds. The existing custody arrangement was settled legally. She's had minimal contact with Emma for 3 years, and these allegations are transparently false. But she has money now, Frank said. Her new husband has money, Crawford finished. But Dr. Ashworth has more. More importantly, we have the truth on our side. Emma, I know this is difficult, but would you be willing to speak with a judge about your preferences? Emma straightened. I'll do whatever it takes to stay with my dad. Good. That carries significant weight at your age. Crawford turned to Victoria. I'll need documentation of Mrs. Hartley's absence, missed birthdays, school events, medical procedures she didn't attend. I have all of that, Frank said quietly. I kept everything. Every unreturned call, every broken promise, every excuse. I hoped she'd come back for Emma be a real mother. So I documented it all, thinking maybe someday I could show her what she'd missed. Victoria reached over and squeezed his hand. That's going to save us. Crawford spent the next 2 hours going through Frank's meticulous records, 3 years of Emma's life that Melissa had chosen to miss. School plays, science fairs, the appendectomy that had terrified Frank, birthdays with cards that never came, Christmases with promises of visits that never materialized. This is comprehensive, Crawford said with something like admiration. Mr. Miller, this kind of documentation is exactly what we need. Combined with Emma's own testimony and character witnesses, Melissa doesn't stand a chance. What about the allegations about Victoria? Frank asked. The inappropriate relationship claims, Crawford actually smiled. 2 single parents whose daughters are friends who have dinner together, who support each other. Any judge who sees that as inappropriate shouldn't be on the bench. Besides, Dr. Ashworth's reputation is impeccable. If anything, her involvement strengthens your case. It shows Emma has positive female role models in her life, despite her mother's absence. After Crawford left with copies of everything, Victoria stayed. She called the hospital to extend her coverage, then made coffee, while Frank sat with Emma, both of them processing the morning's upheaval. I'm scared, Emma admitted quietly. What if the judge believes her? What if they make me go to California? That's not going to happen, Victoria said firmly. Bringing them both coffee, Emma's mostly milk and sugar the way she liked it. Your dad has raised you brilliantly for 12 years. No judge is going to overturn that because your biological mother suddenly remembered she has a daughter. But what if... Emma. Victoria sat beside her, taking her hands. Look at me. I have resources your mother can't imagine. If she wants a fight, she'll get one. But she won't win. I promise you that. The fierce protectiveness in Victoria's voice made Frank's chest tight. This woman, who had known them for mere months, was ready to go to war for his daughter, their daughter, in all the ways that mattered. The next few days were a blur of legal preparation. Crawford filed their response to Melissa's petition, along with a countermotion that would require Melissa to explain her 3-year absence before any custody considerations could be made. The court date was set for 2 weeks out, lightning fast, for family court. Crawford explained thanks to some string pulling on Victoria's part. Meanwhile, life continued. Frank went to work. Emma went to school, and they maintained their routine of dinners with Victoria and the twins. If anything, the girls grew closer, the twins' fierce loyalty to Emma evident in everything from their glares at Madison Hayes in the school hallway to their insistence that Emma was their real sister, not just a friend. "We could tell the judge that," Rose offered one evening, "that Emma's our sister and she has to stay here." "That's sweet, honey," Victoria said, "but it doesn't quite work that way." "Well, it should," Lily said firmly. "Family is who shows up, not just who's related to you." Frank caught Victoria's eye over the girl's head, saw his own emotions reflected there. These girls, all 3 of them, had become the center of their world. The thought of losing any of them was unbearable. The night before the hearing, Frank couldn't sleep. He stood on his balcony looking out at the city lights when his phone buzzed. "Victoria." "Can't sleep either," she asked when he answered. "Too worried. What if Crawford's wrong? What if she convinces them?" "She won't. Frank, you're the best father I've ever known. Any judge with eyes will see that." "You barely knew me when this all started. The bus, the rescue, that was just 2 months ago." "Feels like a lifetime," Victoria said softly. "Frank, can I tell you something?" "Always." "That day in the hospital when I first met you, covered in soot and bandages, refusing better medical care because you had decent insurance, I knew you were different, special. The way you talked about Emma, the way you dismissed your own heroics, the way you looked at my girls like they were precious, just because they were children who needed help. I think I started falling for you right then." Frank's breath caught. "Victoria, I know the timing is terrible with the custody hearing tomorrow, but I needed you to know. Whatever happens, we're with you, all of us. You and Emma are our family now." "You're ours too," Frank said, the words coming easier than he'd expected. "The girls, you've given us something I didn't think we'd ever have again. A complete family." They stayed on the phone for another hour, not really talking about anything important, just needing the connection. Finally, Victoria yawned. "You should sleep," Frank said. "You have surgeries tomorrow morning before the hearing." "Just a routine appendectomy. I could do it in my sleep." She paused. "Frank, wear the blue tie tomorrow. The one Emma picked out. It brings out your eyes. You notice my eyes. I notice everything about you, Frank Miller. Everything." The courthouse was one of those old buildings that seemed designed to intimidate all marble and echoes, and the weight of decisions that changed lives. Frank adjusted the blue tie Emma had indeed picked out, trying not to fidget as they waited outside the family court chambers. Emma sat between him and Victoria, holding both their hands. The twins were at school, desperately wanting to come, but understanding this wasn't their fight. Crawford stood nearby, reviewing notes on his phone, the picture of calm confidence. Then Melissa arrived. She dressed carefully. Conservative suit, minimal makeup, every inch the concerned mother. David Hartley was with her, his hand possessively on her back, his expression one of barely concealed irritation. Their lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Patricia Stone, whispered last-minute instructions. "Emma," Melissa said, approaching them. "Sweetheart." "Don't," Emma said flatly. "You don't get to sweetheart me, not after 3 years. I'm your mother." "No, you're someone who gave birth to me. There's a difference." Before Melissa could respond, the bailiff called them in. Judge Martha Coleman was in her 60s, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. She reviewed the files before her taking her time, while everyone sat in tense silence. "This is a petition for modification of custody," she began. "Mrs. Hartley, you're seeking primary custody of Emma, age 12. Mr. Miller, you currently have sole custody following Mrs. Hartley's voluntary relinquishment 3 years ago. Is this correct?" Both lawyers confirmed. "Mrs. Hartley, I'll hear your argument first." Patricia Stone stood, launching into a prepared speech about Melissa's renewed stability and improved circumstances that would benefit Emma. She painted Frank as well-meaning but reckless, citing the bus incident and the recent kitchen fire at the hospital as evidence of his pattern of dangerous behavior. Furthermore, Stone continued, Mr. Miller has introduced Emma to an inappropriate relationship with Dr. Victoria Ashworth, a woman he's known for mere months who has essentially bought his affection through a job offer and expensive gifts for Emma. Victoria's hand clenched in her lap, but she remained silent. Emma has also exhibited violent behavior, breaking another student's nose in a physical altercation. This suggests Mr. Miller's influence is promoting aggression rather than proper conflict resolution. Stone went on for another 10 minutes, painting a picture of a father out of his depth, corrupting his daughter with bad influences and dangerous role models. When she finished, Judge Coleman turned to Crawford. Your response, counselor. Crawford stood slowly, deliberately. Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence of Mrs. Hartley's involvement in Emma's life over the past 3 years. He handed the judge a binder that Frank recognized his documentation organized and tabbed by Crawford's team. In 3 years, Mrs. Hartley has seen Emma exactly 4 times. She's missed 37 school events, including science fairs where Emma won first place. She missed Emma's appendectomy last year, despite Mr. Miller calling her repeatedly during the emergency. She's failed to call on 12 birthdays and holidays. She's contributed nothing to Emma's financial support, despite Mr. Miller never requesting a modification to child support because he didn't want to rock the boat. Crawford continued, his voice gaining strength. Mr. Miller, meanwhile, has been both mother and father to Emma. He's maintained steady employment, kept her in advanced classes despite the costs, never missed a parent-teacher conference, and created a stable, loving home despite significant financial challenges. What about these allegations of dangerous behavior? The judge asked. Your Honor, Mr. Miller ran into a burning school bus to save 22 children, including Mrs. Hartley's own nephew, a fact she conveniently forgot to mention. His quick thinking at the hospital prevented a fire from spreading to pediatric wards. These aren't patterns of recklessness. They're patterns of heroism. And the relationship with Dr. Ashworth, Crawford smiled slightly. 2 single parents whose daughters are friends, who support each other, who have built a blended family based on mutual respect and genuine affection. If that's inappropriate, then we need to re-examine our definition of family values. Judge Coleman nodded thoughtfully. I'd like to hear from Emma. Emma stood, her voice clear despite her obvious nervousness. Your Honor, I want to stay with my dad. He's been there every single day of my life. When I was sick, he slept in a chair by my hospital bed. When I struggled with math, he learned Common Core just to help me. When Mom left, he never said a bad word about her, even though I could see how much she hurt him. She took a breath. My mom says my dad is a bad influence, but he taught me to stand up for what's right. Yes, I hit Madison Hayes, and I'm not proud of that. But she'd been bullying me for weeks about my dad being just a construction worker, and I couldn't let her diminish him like that. He's not just anything, he's everything to me. And what about Dr. Ashworth, Sim? The judge asked gently. Emma smiled for the first time. Victoria, Dr. Ashworth, she's amazing. She and her daughters have become family, real family, the kind that shows up, that cares, that makes you feel like you belong. Mom talks about providing me with opportunities, but Victoria's already doing that. She encourages my love of science. She's here for important moments. She makes my dad smile in a way I haven't seen since Mom left. That's enough, Melissa interjected. Your Honor, clearly, my daughter has been coached. I haven't been coached. Emma's voice rose. These are my words, my feelings. You want to know the truth, the real truth. I don't want to live with you. You chose David in California over me. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it. Just like I've had to live without a mother for 3 years. The courtroom was silent. Even Melissa seemed stunned by the raw honesty in Emma's voice. Judge Coleman looked at Melissa. Mrs. Hartley, can you explain your 3-year absence from Emma's life? Melissa shifted uncomfortably. I was building a new life, establishing stability. For 3 years, you couldn't manage a weekend visit in 3 years. California is far. It's a 2-hour flight, Mrs. Hartley. I've reviewed your financial records as submitted. You and Mr. Hartley took 6 vacations in the past year, including to Hawaii, Europe, and the Caribbean. But you couldn't make it to see your daughter. Melissa had no answer for that. Judge Coleman turned to Frank. Mr. Miller, do you have anything you'd like to add? Frank stood slowly. Your Honor,
I'm not perfect. I'm a construction worker who's learning to be a facilities manager. I make mistakes, but I love my daughter more than life itself.
Every decision I make is with her best interests at heart. If Melissa wants to be part of Emma's life, I won't stop her. But it has to be on Emma's terms when Emma's ready, and it has to be consistent. She can't drop in and out whenever it's convenient. The judge nodded. Dr. Ashworth, while you're not a party to this case, I understand you're significantly involved. Would you like to make a statement? Victoria stood elegant and composed. Your Honor, I've had the privilege of knowing Frank and Emma for 2 months. In that time, I've seen a father who exemplifies everything we should value: integrity, courage, devotion, humility. He's raising a brilliant, kind, strong young woman who will undoubtedly make significant contributions to the world. Any disruption to their bond would be a tragedy, not just for them, but for everyone whose lives they'll touch. She paused. I lost my own father when the twins were babies. Watching Frank with Emma, seeing what a devoted father looks like, has healed something in my daughters. And in me. We're not trying to replace anyone. We're just trying to build something good and strong and lasting. Together. Judge Coleman reviewed her notes, the courtroom holding its breath. I've made my decision, she said finally. Mrs. Hartley, your petition is denied. Furthermore, your parental rights remain terminated as per the original agreement. You may petition for supervised visitation if you can demonstrate consistent interest and involvement for a minimum of 6 months. Melissa's lawyer started to object, but the judge raised her hand. Mr. Miller has been an exemplary father under difficult circumstances. Emma's preferences at her age carry significant weight, and she's been crystal clear about her wishes. The relationship with Dr. Ashworth and her family appears to be healthy and beneficial for all involved. She looked directly at Melissa. Mrs. Hartley, you made a choice 3 years ago. You chose your new life over your daughter. You don't get to undo that choice simply because Mr. Miller's circumstances have improved. Parenthood isn't a part-time job you can pick up when it's convenient or profitable. Then she turned to Emma. Young lady, you're fortunate to have a father who loves you so deeply, and it seems you've found an extended family that values you as well. Cherish that. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down and Emma flew into Frank's arms, sobbing with relief. Victoria wrapped her arms around both of them, her own tears flowing freely. Even Crawford looked satisfied, shaking Frank's hand with genuine warmth. Melissa stood frozen, David pulling at her arm, clearly eager to leave. She looked at Emma one more time, something breaking in her expression. I did love you, she said quietly. I just loved myself more. Then she was gone, heels clicking on marble, the sound fading until it was just memory. Outside the courthouse, the twins were waiting, having convinced their driver to pick them up from school early. They crashed into Emma, all 3 girls hugging and crying and laughing simultaneously. We knew you'd stay, Lily said. We already moved your stuff into the guest room at our house for sleepovers, Rose added. You didn't actually move my stuff, did you? Emma asked, laughing through her tears. Just mentally, Rose admitted. But we planned it all out. Victoria's hand found Frank's, their fingers interlacing naturally now. So what happens now? She asked softly. Frank looked at their daughters, their 3 daughters, because that's what they'd become. And then at Victoria, this woman who'd stood by them, fought for them, chosen them. Now we build that family you talked about in court, he said. The real kind, the kind that shows up. Is that a proposal, Mr. Miller? Victoria teased, though her eyes were serious. It's a promise, Frank said. We'll take it slow, do it right. Make sure the girls are okay with everything. But Victoria, She kissed him then, right there on the courthouse steps, while their daughters squealed with delight and surprise. Finally, Emma exclaimed, do you know how frustrating it's been watching you 2 dance around each other? Seriously, Rose agreed. We were about to lock you in a closet until you figured it out. That only works in movies, but Lily pointed out practically. As they walked to their cars, 2 vehicles but 1 family, now Frank's phone buzzed. A text from Rodriguez. Heard about court, knew that X was trouble, glad you won. Also City reversed the layoffs. Turns out having a hero on the crew is good PR. Job's here if you want it. Frank showed the text to Victoria, who raised an eyebrow. You're not actually considering going back to construction, are you? No, Frank said without hesitation. My place is at the hospital now. With you. All of you. Good answer, Victoria said, then called to the girls. Who wants ice cream to celebrate? The chorus of me was deafening. As they drove to the ice cream shop, Victoria's Bentley following Frank's truck, the girls having split up to ride with each parent, Frank caught Emma looking at him in the rear-view mirror. You okay, baby girl? More than okay, Dad. We're finally a real family, not just you and me against the world anymore. We were always a real family, Em. I know, but now we're a bigger one, a better one, she paused. Mom was wrong, you know. You're not nobody special. You're everything special. And Victoria sees it. We all do. Frank's throat was too tight to respond, but Emma understood. She always did. At the ice cream shop, they pushed 2 tables together, making space for their unconventional family. The twins debated flavors with scientific precision, while Emma mediated. Victoria received 3 calls from the hospital, but ignored them all. Her attention focused entirely on this moment, this victory, this beginning. I have something to tell you all, Victoria said once they were settled with their sundaes. I've been working on something a surprise, but after today I think it's time to share. She pulled out her phone, showing them a photo of architectural plans. This is the design for the new family housing at the hospital, the Ashworth Miller Family Center. Frank nearly choked on his ice cream. The what? I had the name changed last week, pending your approval, of course. But I wanted something that honored not just what you did saving those children, but who you are. A father who understands what families need when children are sick. That's... Frank couldn't find words. It's perfect, Emma said firmly. The Ashworth Miller Family Center. Our names together. Like a real family, Lily added. We are a real family, Rose corrected. Just not the traditional kind. Victoria reached across the table, taking Frank's hand. What do you think? Is it too much too soon? Frank looked around the table at these 4 females who'd changed his life completely. 2 months ago, he'd been a struggling single father worried about making rent and buying school supplies. Now he had a job. He was growing to love a woman who stood by him against all challenges, and 3 daughters who filled his life with chaos and joy in equal measure. It's perfect, he said simply. That night after the twins had been dropped off at home, with promises of a sleepover that weekend, Frank and Emma returned to their apartment. It felt smaller somehow after the emotional enormity of the day. Dad, Emma said as they settled on the couch with leftover Chinese food, what happens if Victoria wants us to move in with them? Their house is huge and it would make sense, but this is our home. Frank considered carefully. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, together. No one's going to force us into anything we're not ready for. But you love her. It wasn't a question, but Frank answered anyway. Yeah, Em, I do. And she loves you. The twins told me she cried happy tears after your first real date. The twins need to learn about privacy, Frank said, but he was smiling. They're 8. Privacy isn't in their vocabulary. Emma leaned against his shoulder. I'm glad Mom lost. Is that terrible? No, baby, it's honest. She made her choices. Do you think she'll try to see me? The judge said she could petition for visits. I don't know, but if she does, we'll handle it. As a family, all 5 of us. Emma smiled at that. 5. I like the sound of that. As she headed to bed, Emma paused in her doorway. Dad, thank you for fighting for me, for choosing me, for everything. Always, Em. Always. Alone in the quiet apartment, Frank stood at the window looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Victoria was probably tucking the twins into bed, telling them about the day's victory. Somewhere, Melissa was heading back to California with her husband, perhaps regretting her choices, or perhaps just angry she hadn't won. Somewhere, 22 children were living their lives because one day Frank had chosen to run toward danger instead of away from it. His phone buzzed. Victoria, again. The twins want to know if Emma can come to their school's science showcase Friday. Apparently, they've been telling everyone about their brilliant big sister who's going to win the state science fair. Frank typed back, she'll be there. We both will. Good, it's a date.
One of many, I hope. One of many, Frank confirmed. He thought about the Ashworth Miller Family Center, about their names linked together in something permanent and meaningful.
It was fast, probably too fast by conventional standards. But nothing about their story had been conventional. A burning bus, a rescue. A CEO and a construction worker. 3 girls who'd decided they were sisters regardless of blood. Sometimes the best families were the ones you chose, the ones you fought for, the ones you built from scratch, with nothing but love and determination and the courage to run towards something better even when it seemed impossible. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The hospital, the girls' schools, blending their very different worlds into something sustainable. But tonight, Frank Miller, construction worker, single father, unlikely hero, was content. He'd kept his promise to Emma. They'd won. They were safe. And they were no longer alone. The city lights twinkled below each one, representing a life, a story, a possibility. Frank's story had taken an unexpected turn, but maybe that was the point. Maybe you couldn't plan for the important things. Maybe you just had to be ready to run toward them when they appeared, arms open, heart willing, ready to catch whatever or whoever needed catching. His phone buzzed one more time. A photo from Victoria, all 3 girls piled on the twins' bed, already planning their next adventure. The caption read, "Our daughters. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it?" Frank saved the photo knowing it would join the collection on his wall, not newspaper clippings about heroism, but pictures of family, the real kind, the kind that showed up. "Our daughters," he said to the empty room, testing the words. They fit perfectly.